The time is now 5:33 p.m. on Wednesday, December 11th, 2024, and this public meeting of the DC State Board of Education will come to order. The roll will now be called, to determine the presence of a quorum. Director Butler, please call the roll.
Representative Barnes.
Present.
Representative Barnes.
Present.
Representative Lynn. Representative Mayer.
Present.
Representative Ting.
Present.
Representative Best. Representative Chang.
Present.
Representative Goulet.
Here.
Representative Henderson.
Present.
Representative O'Leary.
Here.
Representative Reed.
Present.
Representative Williams.
Present.
Representative Patterson.
Present.
Representative Thompson.
Present.
Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Director Butler. A quorum has been determined, and the State Board will now proceed with the business portion of the meeting. Members, we have a draft agenda before us. I believe there is at least one correction to the agenda, but I'm going to look to make sure.
Yes, I would like to move to strike SR 24-28, addressing HVAC issues in DC schools from the agenda so that we have more time to research and talk to DGS about working out some details.
Thank you, Representative Mayer. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it has been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Yes?
I do agree with Representative Mayer moving it to get more public input, but I think it should be something urgent that we address in the new year.
Any further discussion? I just want to remind members that agenda changes, I believe, are not a simple majority. We need 2/3 of the members. If there is no further discussion, the motion is to adopt these minutes. I will ask for the yeas and the nays. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. Motion is approved. We now have minutes from our December working session. Is there a motion to adopt these minutes? Representative Williams, is there a second?
Second.
I think I heard Representative Henderson. All right. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Perfect. All right, seeing no further discussion, the motion is to adopt these minutes. I'm going to again ask for the yeas and the nays. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion is approved. On behalf of the DC State Board of Education members, I want to welcome guests and members of the public, including those who are watching live via the District Knowledge Network, to our public meeting. And I guess those who are watching or joining us virtually on the panel, which is at Dingu here. The State Board typically holds its regularly scheduled public meetings on the third Wednesday of every month at Old Council Chambers, 441 4th Street Northwest. I recognize that this one is not this month, but we are having it a week early to make sure the staff and everyone else can observe the holidays comfortably. So I want to thank our panelists, public witnesses, and those who are watching for their flexibility with our early meeting this month. This evening, the State Board looks forward to hearing from 13 public witnesses. We encourage the public to sign up every month to share testimony. Sign-up closes 48 hours before the public meeting, and the link can be found at www.sboe.dc.gov. This week, actually today, we met with Deputy Mayor Kine to share updates and discuss continued areas of collaboration. We also look forward to meeting with Dr. Mitchell to continue planning for the updated health and physical education standards and graduation requirements later this month. Next week, we are excited to be hosting our inaugural Celebration of Service event where we will honor our outgoing members, former student representatives, and advocates. But we also look forward this evening to voting on those ceremonial resolutions. I am now going to turn to, I guess, Chief Godbrinson. Is that the right Is that the right title? All right, so I'm going to now turn to OSSI Chief of Staff, Kate Gottfredson, to share remarks. Dr. Mitchell, our interim superintendent, has a scheduling conflict this evening.
Thank you so much, President Thompson, Vice President Patterson, and members of the State Board of Education. My name is Kate Gottfredson. I am the Chief of Staff for the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, and I welcome this opportunity to offer remarks to the State Board of Education and the listening public on behalf of the Interim State Superintendent of Education, Dr. Antoinette Mitchell. This evening, I'll outline our agency's accomplishments over the past month and provide a brief preview of the shared work that lies ahead. Over the last month, OSSI has published a number of required and important reports, including our annual attendance report, highlighting significant reductions in chronic absenteeism in the district, and unique analyses on the pre-K attendance, early dismissal, and more. Data on LEA compliance with training and screening for reading difficulties, our annual Head Start Child Care Partnership Report, and our annual non-resident student review and findings report. On November 26th, OSSI released preliminary unaudited enrollment figures for the 2024-25 school year. Across the country, public school enrollment in urban schools has plummeted by more than 5% since 2019. However, in our preliminary data, we show that DC public schools enrollment continues its uninterrupted rebound from the pandemic, reaching a record high this year, with nearly 100,000 students enrolled across DCPS and public charter schools. Overall, public and public charter school enrollment in the district has increased by 14.2% in the last decade. Even as we face declining birth rates in the district, parents are continuing to vote with their feet and demonstrate their trust in DC's public educational system. OSSI recently won a competitive $4.9 million grant to support early learners in the district. Our universal pre-K system is the envy of jurisdictions around the country, and the new preschool development grant will further bolster our early learning system by providing post-secondary scholarships to early educators, launching innovative supports for social emotional development and children with disabilities, and bolstering implementation of pyramid models in Strong Start DC, the district's early intervention program. We're pleased to be one of just 11 states to win this federal grant award. Now moving on to a subject very close to this board's heart and minds, OSSI released the annual DC School Report Card on December 5th. As members know well, this is the first release of our updated report card, which incorporates the enhancements codified in State Board Resolution 24-5. Most notably, the newly released report card allows users to easily compare data for up to 3 schools at one time on their cell phone, tablet, or computer. Further, the new report card eliminates the old star rating system and displays the accountability score in an easily understandable format that contextualizes the scores against district norms and its constituent parts. OSSI again appreciates the robust engagement we received from this board and the public on this work product, as the collective feedback made our report card a better, more useful tool for district families and stakeholders to learn about individual schools' performance. So another great way for families to learn more about individual school performance and schools is by attending EdFest, DC's annual public school fair. Last Saturday, we hosted EdFest for high schools at Eastern High School, and it was so great to see a number of board members there. Superintendent Mitchell and I were happy to say hello to Representative Chang, Henderson, Patterson, and Goulet, and I'm sure others were there as well. This Saturday, December 14th, we'll be hosting EdFest for the rising students in pre-K 3 through grade 8 from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the DC Armory. 177 schools, 11 pre-K CBOs, and 35 education service organizations will be present. In addition to learning about public school options, families will also be able to access immunizations, sign up for library cards, and receive free kids' lunches and more. So we really encourage everyone interested and all families to attend this fantastic event at the Armory this weekend, and hopefully can register ahead of time at myschooldc.org/events/edfest. As we look forward to the shared work ahead of the new year, OSSE appreciates the board is at closing 2024 with a panel on cell phone policy use in the district. This is an important topic that has important implications for student learning, school culture, and student safety. OSSE will be listening closely to this evening's conversation. In the new year, we look forward to resuming our work to reimagine the district's graduation requirements and update the district's health and physical education standards. On behalf of Dr. Mitchell, I want to wish all of you a very wonderful end of 2024, and we look forward to being here again in the new year.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Kate. We appreciate OSSE's continued collaboration on important education issues that impact all students in the district. You're welcome to hang out with us up here, or you're welcome to listen from the audience, whichever makes you feel most comfortable. We are actually about to turn to our expert panel. Our panelists will share their perspectives about potential benefits and drawbacks to specific policies such as limiting or banning cell phones in schools. We are pleased to welcome you all. If you are here in person, please come to the table when I call your name. Dr. Antoinette Campbell Anderson, Deputy Director, Johns Hopkins Center for Safe and Healthy Schools. Harry Hughes, who I saw, Instructional Superintendent, Cluster 7, DC Public Schools. Aaron Smith, Chief Technology Officer, Loudoun County Public Schools, who I believe is virtual. Nicole Travers, Senior Director of School Support and Program Data, DC Charter Alliance. Should be, okay, she's on her way, but she's in person, thank you. Erin Winery, Senior Project Manager from Education Commission of the States, who I believe is virtual. Happy to start with the virtual testimony since one of our in-person panelists is on their way to give them some time. Each panelist will have up to 5 minutes. And then when we begin, we will begin with one round of member questions from the state board. We will begin, I guess, with Dr. Campbell Anderson, who should be online, Johns Hopkins Center for Safety and Healthy Schools.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. So, good evening. There's a bit of an echo. Sorry.
We can hear you clearly on our end.
Okay.
In a second, I'm pretty sure we'll also be able to see you on our end. But you are welcome to, and I'm assuming you can see the clock, the timer, because I cannot virtually.
I cannot.
Okay, so we'll give it one moment and I'll wait for a signal from the staff because they'll keep us honest.
Okay, I can see it now.
All right, perfect. I'll turn it back over to you to start. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening, members of the DC State Board of Education. My name is Annette Campbell Anderson, and I am the Deputy Director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Safe and Healthy Schools. I'm deeply honored to be with you this evening to discuss the use of social media and cell phones in schools. My comments are abbreviated this evening, but I'm told that you do have my full comments at your disposal for further consideration. While cell phones have been lauded as by some as a modern-day teaching tool, high rates of cell phone usage in schools is noted as a major instructional distraction, simultaneously adding to increased rates of anxiety and depression among school-age children and teens. The American Psychological Association reports that 41% of teens with the highest social media usage at 5 hours or more per day also rate their mental health as poor or very poor. This brings us to the evolving relationship between mental health, schools, and social media. The National Center for Education Statistics reports that 76% of schools across the country currently do have a policy in place limiting or banning cell phone use during the academic day. This has most likely occurred since administrators report constant student distraction by cell phone use in schools. But the inconsistency of existing policies and bans makes it very difficult to currently gauge their effectiveness. Meanwhile, we do know that students are on their phones for about 43 minutes per school day, receiving on average up to 237 notifications from various apps or gaming sites each day, with about a quarter of these notifications happening during school. About 200 school districts have actually now sued social media companies, blaming them for the connection to the mental health crisis plaguing our youth. The crux of this argument is that social media has designed highly addictive products at the very same time that districts are working with limited resources to address student mental health concerns. Additionally, there is some data that suggests that cell phone usage does impact academic outcomes. One study indicates that students who did not use cell phones during class and actively took notes had greater recall and scored a full letter grade and a half higher than those who were actively using cell phones in the same instructional setting. So what can schools do to promote healthier outcomes that everyone can live with around cell phones and social media? Number one, schools need to talk about it. Schools need to have active and ongoing conversations with parents, teachers, and students throughout the school year as a check-in to gauge the current use and the impact of social media in individual school buildings. They also need to collaboratively create realistic social media policies around social media usage in school and as well out of school that demonstrates ongoing attention to this issue. Schools should also consider existing technology that can baffle social media apps during the school day to help reduce student tendencies to pick up their phone constantly during the school day and engage with social media content and endless scrolling. Next, I would recommend that the district consider hiring the equivalent of a social media czar for the district, whose job it would be to monitor student participation in social media during the day at a macro level so that there is some data awareness, data-informed awareness of what is happening with students to track the socio-emotional data and align it with mental health outcomes. Finally, each school should consider appointing a site-based school liaison whose job it is to aggregate data at the school level related to the academic outcomes and to monitor usage in classrooms as well as unsupervised spaces such as classrooms, hallways, lunchrooms, bathrooms, etc. I look forward to working with you as we forge a path together in the best interest of all kids. Thank you again for this deep honor to share. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Mr. Aaron Smith, Chief Technology Officer, Loudoun County Public Schools.
Awesome. Well, good evening, President Thompson and members of the State Board. My name is Aaron Smith, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Loudoun County Public Schools, which is right up the road from you guys. I've been with LCPS in some capacity for 38 years, 13 as a K-12 student and 25 as an employee, supporting educational technology. This is my school district, and this is what I care deeply about. I'm pleased to be here tonight to provide testimony on student cell phone use in LCPS. LCPS recently implemented policy 8655, which is our student personal device use policy and covers student cell phone use to address this use of personal electronic devices at school. Loudoun County Public Schools, our board officially adopted this policy on June 25th, 2024. So we implemented that at the beginning of the school year this year in August, and the process began in January of 2024. The development of policy 8655 involved extensive feedback from various stakeholder groups, including schools, staff, students, and families. We met with multiple stakeholder groups. We had multiple surveys and feedback options that were sent out. And we managed this policy through our Student Behavior and Accountability Committee, which reviewed the policy before submitting it for our full school board for approval. Feedback gathered during the policy development revealed a consensus that LCPS should have a single division-wide policy. While there were differing opinions, students and teachers definitely had difference of opinions, a common thread was that consistency was needed from classroom to classroom and school to school. The policy received more feedback and comments from our community than any other policy that we have put forward for feedback. To assess the effectiveness of Policy 8655, we're about 16 or 17 weeks into our school year, and to identify any areas for improvement, we actually posted a survey on Monday for our stakeholders, including our students, staff, and parents. The survey has been sent out, and we've already received extensive feedback. We already have 3,400 participants sharing about 50,000 ratings of different thoughts and topics. The survey will help us identify challenges or concerns and solicit suggestions for clarifications or modification. As I said, this is a new policy for us. Based on the feedback received, LCPS will consider making necessary revisions to our policy. However, any official changes to the policy will require school board approval, as this is a school board policy. Any potential changes will likely be aligned with the start of our next school year to minimize disruptions, particularly in ensuring consistency of applications in all of our schools during the school year. We do have state guidance. In July 2024, Governor Youngkin issued Executive Order 33, which tasks the Virginia Department of Education to develop a model policy on student cell phone use. VDOE released their official policy in September 2024, so after ours was approved and our school year already started. It is important to note that this model policy serves as a guide for school divisions, but school divisions retain the authority to make the best decisions that suit their communities through their official board actions. Policy 8655 aims to balance leveraging technology's educational potential and minimizing disruption to the learning environment by establishing clear guidelines. LCPS seeks to foster a productive academic atmosphere while promoting responsible digital citizenship among students. School level use outlines, elementary schools, personal technology is not allowed during the school day. Middle school, devices must be silenced, kept out of sight, and stored in lockers during the school day, but before and after school use is allowed. And in high school, devices must be placed in designated classroom storage locations and silenced during all instructional times. And high schools have flexibility to allow acceptable device usage and are directed to set those expectations with those students. Designated use, students may only use personal technology at designated locations and at specified times. Cell phones and earbuds must be stored off and away during instructional periods, except in cases of documented accommodations. Smartwatches are permitted. At this point, it's one of our areas of extreme feedback from our staff and our families, but they must not cause a disruption to instruction or they will be asked to be removed. And students with valid accommodations will retain access to their personal devices, and all those requests are handled through the appropriate channels of the teams. So in conclusion, LCPS is committed to maintaining a productive academic environment while promoting responsible digital citizenship among students. Policy 8655 reflects this commitment by establishing clear guidelines for the use of personal devices in schools. The ongoing feedback and evaluation process also enables us to adapt the policy to best serve the needs of our students and our broader community. And LCPS believes that this policy provides a framework for appropriately using personal devices in schools. The policy's implementation and ongoing feedback and evaluation will enable us to create a learning environment conducted to academic success while preparing students for responsible digital citizenships when they leave. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you this evening, and I will be around if there's any questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you again. And our last virtual testimony should be Aaron Winery, Education Commission in the States.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Good evening. My name is Erin Winery. I am a senior project manager at Education Commission of the States. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan education policy research organization, and we regularly share education policy trends with policymakers, just like this group today. So thank you to the State Board for inviting me to present. I'll start by identifying the 3 target groups policymakers have in mind when considering cell phone policies. We know that these policies must balance the needs of teachers, students, and parents and guardians. A recent poll of members of the National Education Association found that 90% of teachers support school policies prohibiting access to cell phones during instructional time, and 83% would expand that to the entire school day. And when we consider things that teachers want from a cell phone policy, we've identified two concerns. First is a distraction-free classroom. As mentioned earlier by Aaron Smith, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin signed an executive order that directs several state entities, including the state superintendent and Department of Education, to issue guidance establishing cell phone-free education environments. Louisiana and South Carolina have issued complete bans on cell phones during the entire school day, and Florida has banned cell phones during instructional time. Pennsylvania recently expanded school safety and mental health grants to include the purchase of cell phone lockable bags. The second is how cell phones and social media impact student health and influence digital citizenship. This year, the Colorado legislature directed the Department of Education to create a resource bank of promising program materials and curricula about the mental and physical impacts of social media use. And the bill appropriated about $14,000 to do so. Georgia updated character education policies to include responsible digital citizenship and the safe, appropriate use of technology, the internet, and social media. Next in our groups of individuals to consider are students. We know that students don't particularly like not having access to their cell phones. Earlier this year, one Texas high school experienced a multi-day walkout after requiring students to forfeit cell phones for the entire school day. And many of those students depend on access to cell phones or other assistive technologies to support their classroom learning. Indiana passed a relatively hands-off state policy, primarily requiring schools to adopt a policy prohibiting cell phones during instructional time. But the bill includes two common exceptions. First, an exception to use cell phones in an emergency or to manage healthcare. And second, it explicitly states that a local policy may not prohibit a student from using their device during instructional time if related to their individual education program. The Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates has issued a statement noting concerns about segregating or separating students with IEPs and potentially creating new burdens for parents who may have to ensure that plans are updated to reflect or new policies don't interfere with their students' assistive technology. And this brings us to our third constituency, parents and guardians. A recent poll from the National Parents Union found that over 3/4 of parents want their child to have access to a cell phone in case of an emergency. News reports about a school district in Texas note that the district is considering a policy to prevent students from accessing their cell phones during a lockdown. The district is concerned that parents may receive notifications about school emergencies from their students and rush to the school, potentially interfering with active investigations and first responders, or even countermanding safety instructions from school personnel. Recent guidance from the U.S. Department of Education encourages co-designing policies with students, parents, and school leaders. Minnesota is an example of encouraging local weigh-in. The legislature has directed school districts to adopt a policy on cell phones and directs 2 principal associations to make best practices available to schools. And we've observed that state leaders are, for the most part, following this advice and leaving many of the details up to local districts. We anticipate that the 2025 legislative session will continue to see a fair amount of policy action in this area. And we also anticipate cell phone and social media policies to be a trending topic in governors' State of the State addresses. We will have analysis of their addresses on our website on a rolling basis in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to turn to our in-person witnesses. Mr. Hughes.
Good evening, representatives of the State Board of Education, staff, and members of the public. I am Harry Hughes, an instructional superintendent at the District of Columbia Public Schools. At DCPS, we divide our 117 schools into 9 clusters, each of which is supported by an instructional superintendent. In my role, I support 13 standalone middle schools. I work closely with the school principals to promote student sense of belonging, academic success, and preparation for high school. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about DCPS's approach to cell phone usage in middle schools. At DCPS, educators teach students to integrate technology into their learning in impactful ways. The goal of this approach is to empower every learner through technology and teach students to responsibly and respectfully use technology online as digital citizens. While cell phones and other personal devices can support learning in some contexts, they can also distract from learning and make teaching more difficult in classrooms. Students at nearly every DCPS school possess and bring cell phones to school daily. All 13 of the schools in my cluster restrict cell phone use during the school day from the time students arrive until the time they are dismissed. At most schools, this means that DCPS staff collect cell phones at arrival, secure them during the day, and return them to students at the end of the day. This can also mean that students deposit their phones in a magnetically sealed patch that prohibits them from using them while allowing the phone to remain in their locker during the school day. Eliminating cell phone use during the day has several benefits for the middle school students I support. No cell phones mean fewer distractions during the school day and more student engagement. Students are more likely to talk with each other in positive ways in the hallways and at other times during the school day. Teachers do not need to enforce the expectation in the classroom since cell phones are collected at the start of the day, preserving valuable instructional time. In March of this year, the Deputy Mayor for Education published a report, Strengthening School Safety in Washington, D.C., with input from DCPS staff, parents, and students. One of the findings of this report is that, quote, social media is a major driver of conflict and can create peer pressure and escalate even seemingly minor situations, end quote. Middle school leaders report that restricting cell phones means that conflicts are less likely to escalate over social media. Each school in my cluster communicates their cell phone expectations to students and families in several ways so that everyone understands the procedures. Expectations are shared in writing with families during the summer and with students during summer bridge activities and during the beginning of the school when routines and procedures are taught. Middle school handbooks also include specific information about cell phone expectations. In my experience, parents are very supportive of restricting cell phone use during the school day because they understand that it will support increased student engagement and success during the day. Given DCPS's robust investment in technology, there are ample computers and other devices available for students within the building, making cell phones unnecessary for academic pursuits at the middle school level. I want to respond to one concern that I have heard raised in the public conversation about restricting cell phones, the desire for students to have cell phones so that parents can contact them easily during the school day in an emergency or otherwise. While I understand this desire, the truth is that during an emergency, the last thing we want is for students to be distracted by their cell phones. Instead, students should be following directions of trusted adults and taking the steps that they have practiced during drills. In emergency, cell phone usage would make our students less safe. For more regular communication, our schools all have front offices staffed by adults who can quickly contact the student when a parent calls to update dismissal plans, for example, or for other matters. I want to close by noting something that the principals I support have shared with me. Restricting cell phones was their idea. Coming out of the pandemic, principals wanted to ensure that the focus of middle school was on belonging and learning. They worked together to develop many of the routines and procedures that we see in place today because they believe that this approach benefits students, and I agree with them wholeheartedly. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak about this topic today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Travers.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Travers, and I'm the Senior Director of School Support and Program Data at the DC Charter School Alliance, the local nonprofit that advocates on behalf of public charter schools to ensure every student can choose high-quality public schools that prepare them for lifelong success. We are proud that 100% of DC's charter LEAs, who represent more than 47,000 students, choose to be members of the DC Alliance. I want to begin by thanking the DC State Board of Ed for inviting me to share insights with you about our member schools' experiences and feedback about policies to ban or limit cell phone use in their schools. The topic of cell phone use in schools has been at the forefront of the minds of school leaders and families for a number of years. We've had extensive discussions with our LEA members to understand their experiences, what is working and what is not, ranging from allowing full phone access during the day all the way to banning phones upon entry. We see cell phone use as a double-edged sword. According to a 2023 survey conducted by the Pew Research Center, 72% of high school teachers identified cell phone usage as a significant issue, while 60% reported that enforcing cell phone policies was either very or somewhat challenging. We recognize that on one hand, cell phones are a useful tool that when used appropriately allows students to access educational content and serve as a communication device for student safety. On the other hand, when not managed well, phones can be a distraction for students. Our role at the DC Alliance is to support our school leaders as they develop and refine their own policy making. Ultimately, the leaders implement policies and procedures that they believe will work best in their unique school communities and support maximum student learning. Schools align policies with their models, size, and demographics. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. As we convene today to discuss possible path forward, the DC Alliance would like to offer two main lessons from our LEAs. First, cell phone bans are incredibly difficult to implement. LEAs have reported disruptions in classrooms that often exceed the level of disruption that occurred when phones were in the students' possession during the day. In schools that have tried to ban phones, the social and emotional regulation of students who are used to having regular access to their phones and suddenly do not can be even more difficult and disruptive to learning than the alternative. Schools have reported parents frequently voice their displeasure with cell phone bans and discomfort in not being able to engage with their children during the day. Neighborhood violence and tragedies are too often realities in some communities, and the ability for parents and children to communicate if trouble is present provides peace of mind. Second, schools that have attempted to implement bans report the costly nature of cell phone bans, inclusive of the money, time, and labor spent enforcing the policy. Schools have tried the various methods, such as locked pouches, that hold each individual student's phone during the day. Schools have shared that while retaining possession of the phone in the pouch has helped some students with emotional deregulation, however, the pouches are sometimes damaged and students have tried to cut them open to access their phones. That leads to the consequences required for the student actions along with replacement costs. Cell phone lock boxes have also been used to store devices during the day. Not only are the boxes costly, they're also susceptible to damage. And when the expensive smartphones inside can be harmed, it can create disputes between the families and the schools. The time required for the schools to negotiate and resolve disputes among compliance with cell phone bans have often overwhelmed school staff. After accounting for the costly nature of the equipment, the lost instructional time, and the breached trust, some LEAs have piloted bans, have determined that it's not worth it. Many LEAs have found it more effective to work with students and staff to enforce strong digital etiquette around appropriate use of cell phones, setting clear expectations and consequences for not adhering to the rules. Schools manage individual infractions as they arise, just as they would any other classroom management challenge. Some schools have implemented an honor code approach, encouraging students to independently store their phones or keep them out of sight. This strategy supports the development of personal responsibility and decision-making skills, which are essential for success in professional environments. Our LEAs largely believe that if the city were able to move to a broad ban, it would be at a significant cost. Additional city funding to support each LEA in the implementation of a cell phone ban would be vital, and even if that funding could be secured, it could also impact the culture of schools have worked so hard to build. Given the challenging fiscal climate in DC, our schools question whether the cost of cell phone bans are a top priority at this time. Even if it's determined as a recommended policy, most schools wouldn't identify this issue as the one that takes the priority over the multitude of others facing our schools, including attendance, mental health, and educator retention. Ultimately, the DC Alliance believes in the importance of allowing each school to determine the cell phone use policy is most effective for their individual community. We appreciate the SBOE for creating this opportunity for the important discourse on this topic, and I thank you and welcome your time and your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Travers. We are now going to move to a round of member questions from the State Board. Director Butler is going to call that round of questions, and each member will have 3 minutes. This is a reminder to members and a First time note to panelists that 3 minutes does include both the time to ask the question and any response. Director Butler, I'm coming to you.
Thank you. Representative Barnes?
Hello, each of you. Thank you all for your testimonies today. Definitely some enlightening information. And I'm going to start with Ms. Travers first, because you're fresh in my mind. I love the amount of time that you mentioned balance, and you had both the perception of students and educators, as well as parents. I mentioned you saying a lot, it's a difficulty doing this. It's very difficult because ultimately what happens is this will bring out sneaky kids. So it's very hard for you to like try to implement this. And then ultimately what's going to happen is that the students, they're going to try to find a way to get the phones in. So, yeah. And then you mentioned a lot of, different cons of it from, some phone, the money that's spent. There's a lot of money spent on this. So I definitely applaud you for that. And yeah, and then I want to go quickly to Mr. Hughes. I heard you mention how can we responsibly using cell phones. I want to know, what does that specifically look like? Because I hear a lot of educators and students say something about responsibly using cell phones. I want to know, what specifically to teachers does that look like?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
How can we responsibly use cell phones? You mentioned, responsibly using cell phones. What does that look like?
So, in speaking of my experience, we have ample access to technology in our middle schools, so we don't need to responsibly use the cell phones, because really there is no reason to have to use cell phones during the instructional environment. The kids have all the resources and tools that they need to be successful.
Okay, cool. And then also, I remember mentioning something about engagement. As far as it brings forth, whenever kids don't have their cell phones, they begin to get more connected with each other. They begin to, communicate more with each other, and they begin to bond a little bit more. How can you say that as, what can we do as students to ensure that, instead of simply running to the cell phones, how can we try to incorporate this a little bit more? Because me personally, I'm not gonna lie to you, not just because I'm a student, but because not only is it, a way for engagement, technology is slowly but surely developing more and more. So what can we do to like incorporate this? Because this is a way that a lot of us as students engage with each other. This is a way a lot of us, communicate and talk with one another, and we don't like to just sometimes walk up to each other. I'm not gonna lie. So what can we do to, get that together?
In my experience, what we want to have in our schools are students who feel connected to one another and feel connected to their teachers. We are big in promoting activities that build a student's sense of belonging, that connection to community. I just find that to be difficult with the presence of cell phones. What I enjoy seeing in my middle schools are kiddos who are talking at lunch, playing together at recess, and just connecting in authentic, real ways, not being distracted by the cell phone.
Thank you. Representative Mayor.
Thank you all so much for coming to talk to us about this today. It's been a very hotly debated topic, so it's been really great to get new voices and perspectives. I want to start with Dr. Anderson. I was very intrigued by your social media czar proposal. Those are not words that I've heard spoken in the same sentence before. And I have two main concerns/questions. First, I'm interested in what you think about how it would impact student autonomy, because for me as a high school student with my phone, in a lot of ways that access to the world is symbolic for me and like for what I spend my time doing. And my second part of that question is how that would impact relationships between students and administration, because I could see hostility coming from a relationship like that. So I'm curious about your thoughts on either of those components.
Thank you. That's a really great question. I think what we don't know is whether or not cell phone bans are affecting things like student attendance, whether it is affecting, because we know that, post-pandemic, Many districts have high levels of chronic absenteeism and chronic truancy. And so cell phones are now a part of the social engagement equation, and schools have to take that into account. I personally don't know whether or not a full ban is ever going to be realistic, because to the point that was just made, students are going to figure out how to keep the phones, whether they are physically going to break open cases to get to their cell phones, or whether they're not going to come to school because they are so socially connected to those physical devices. And so my idea around having a social media czar is that we don't have the data. I was in a meeting earlier today where we are trying to, there's no gold standard, there's no randomized trial that looks at what the impact of social media and cell phones in schools really has been and how it's affected the health and well-being of students. And so what we're trying to do now is come up with some ways that we can access that information and measure that, because there are some surveys that have been done, but again, the gold standard in research is a randomized trial, and we haven't gotten to that yet. So I think to that point, I think we've got to be able to measure the data. And I personally think a social media czar at the district level who's collecting that at a macro level, looking at what are the trends? When are students most using the cell phones? Is it in the morning? Is it after school? Is it during school? We don't have much of that information. It's data that we really need to help to drive policy. There are companies that are working on technology. One company, I won't name it because I don't want to promote any particular company, but there are companies that are creating software to baffle the use of social media apps, TikTok, YouTube, etc., during the school day. So if you were saying that parents want to be able to keep in touch with their students,
Thank you, ma'am.
then yes, they can keep in touch with the cell phone, but not the social media apps. Those are two different things in my mind.
Thank you. Representative Ting?
Yes, I would like to ask, Speaker Anderson, would you like to continue and finish that statement?
I was just going to say that I think that we have to differentiate between students having cell phones, because that for parents is a safe and healthy schools issue. It's a school safety issue. And so what's happening is that parents are saying to schools, we've now redefined the in loco parentis relationship between schools and parents by saying that schools have to take over the cell phone piece of parenting. And parents don't want schools to do that. So what I'm saying is that if parents can still access their children on the cell phone and the texting apps, but not the rest of those apps, that is a way to differentiate the access to cell phone and social media use.
All right, I see. So you're suggesting essentially that DC invests in having a cell phone czar to help research and allow not just DC, but everyone to make better
Yes.
cell phone policies. I see.
Yes,
Okay.
that's my first recommendation, and my second recommendation is the software to baffle the social media apps during the school day. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. And I have a question for Mr. Smith. So you mentioned specifically for Loudoun County, on like a school-by-school basis, how expensive is it, like generally speaking, to implement a cell phone ban with exceptions in terms of what Glenn Youngkin signed into passing?
So I can speak to what we've done in our district, where it is not a bell-to-bell ban. It is not putting them in pouches. It is a instructional classroom. So there was some minor investment for things like storage locations for classrooms, so they could have an off-person, off-backpack place to put something so they weren't getting buzz and notifications. So for us, it was very minimal entry, and we did that intentionally so that block banning for elementary and middle school, and then when it's developmentally appropriate for high school students, so that they can learn to use these devices and then have those transition times between classes, at lunch, other times during the day that the school specifies that it's allowed to be used.
Okay, so just to recap, by not implementing locked boxes or locked pouches and rather having it in classroom basis, you were able to minimize the disruption to instructional time and resource spending?
I would say that most of these practices, teachers had already put in place. This policy just codified what practices were already being done. So many teachers already had shoe holder pouches on walls where students put phones. So we really just formalized those practices and created consistency across the district with those implementations for those classrooms that needed it.
I see. Okay, thank you. I yield my time.
Representative Chang.
Thank you all. Ms. Winra, you named quite different priorities and preferences from the three stakeholders, and I'm wondering how you've seen those different perspectives negotiated, balanced, mediated well.
Negotiated well, you ask?
Yes.
I'm pausing to think. As an organization, we don't assist with implementation, so we really just have our state level perspective of what policy has been put in place after stakeholder input. So I would say some of our other speakers might have more insight on how those different priorities have been balanced once pre-policy before the policy is formalized. We, as an organization, we can just only comment that most of the states that we have seen have involved all of those stakeholder groups. The percentage of which, we are valuing parental input over teacher input or student input, the weighing of that will change based on each local district in each state.
Would any other panelist have any guidance on how we get out of the trap of pitting the three stakeholders against one another in any decision that we make?
This is Aaron Smith. I can kind of speak to that a little bit because we went through an extensive feedback process. 6 to 8 months of conversations at schools, student advisory committees, teacher advisory committees, talking with parents at listening sessions, doing surveys, collecting that data, having an iterative policy approach where we started somewhere and then we gathered feedback and we talked to all of our advisory committees. And so it was having all of the conversations and then finding the points of alignment. So like I said, students and teachers did not agree out of the gates about what that policy should be, but they both agreed that there needs to be consistent application from classroom to classroom. So we leaned into the points where there was consistency and where there was agreements. And then you're just going to need to find a middle ground in some area. That's where smartwatches were allowed, but cell phones aren't. Those are kind of appeasing our parent community that want to be able to track their students or know exactly where they're at, but not having the same disruption as a cell phone in the classroom. So those were kind of some of the pullouts that we came out of.
And Mr. Smith, curious as you all were thinking about this, the downsides of the status quo that we currently have in DC, which is, have it be more decentralized and decided by individual school leaders.
Well, we were there for a year and we got feedback that it wasn't working. Consistency was important. So
Thank you.
We actually started there and then went this way as a corrective action.
Thank you.
Representative Best.
Thank you. So I'm torn on this one. I think one of the things that I used to hate when I was in school was when people who were outside of the building were telling us what to do when we were inside the building. Now look at me. So look, I believe that we should let our schools and our LEAs do what they do best and trust that when everyone is involved, that they're going to make the best decisions for their schools in their schools. But it's also my belief that every school should have a policy, but I don't think that it should be decided on this board. I believe that it should be decided by the staff, the leadership, and the families. But also keep in mind that, if improving technological awareness is something that we've been promoting, I fear that total bans do the opposite of what we want to do. Think about all the jobs that have been created just through the use of cell phones alone, and shouldn't we then leverage that if our goal is to prepare our students for the future? I did some research, and I found out some numbers. 51% of employees reported that using their cell phones for work-related, 51% of employees reported using their cell phones for work-related tasks, even in the restroom, right? It's estimated that right now 93.5 million people in the U.S. workforce are mobile workers focusing with their cells. 60% of individuals say that smartphones make them feel more confident and prepared for the work that they do. 75% of individuals affirm that their smartphone plays an important role in enhancing their productivity at work, and almost 80% of employees cannot effectively perform their jobs without cell phones. And so then my comment or my statement is, there comes a time in every society where we have to start to realize maybe we need to look at how we do the things that we do. And I wonder if this is one of those times. If we try to teach the same way that we did when we had, pagers and landlines, right? Of course, we're going to run into some distractions. And so I also say, like, how can we reimagine how we do the things that we do? Especially if the goal is to also improve our technological awareness, because our students will become adults, and by the time they become adults, most of the work that they're going to do is probably going to be on this thing called a cell phone. That's all.
Representative Goulet.
Thank you all for coming and speaking on this tonight. I want to also thank my colleague, Representative O'Leary, for getting this ball rolling, I think, on what's a really important and interesting topic here. I'd like to just start with Superintendent Hughes. I really loved how you discussed the policy at middle schools. How is that similar to what we're doing at elementary and high schools in DC? Can you speak at all generally about how the policy is different or the same in those areas?
Yes, so as I shared in my testimony, and thank you for the question, I directly deal with our 13 middle school principals. I don't have that much context about what happens at the elementary and high school regarding cell phone restrictions.
Okay, I think we should do something similar to what we're doing, because your testimony really made a lot of sense to me. Have you seen that help with the issues that we see of bullying and students not feeling safe in the schools? I know we'd heard before about how issues of bullying, could be accelerated with the use of cell phones, fights, and then, even bullying then continuing even after the school day. Have you seen any reduction in school incidents of bullying since you've put the cell phones away during instructional time?
Well, I'm very proud to say that over the last school year, of my 13 middle schools, we have seen significant increases in seat attendance, significant decreases in reductions in chronic absenteeism, and we've seen a greater sense of belonging, as well as our disciplinary infractions have decreased. I can't necessarily attribute all of that to our cell phone ban, but I do think our cell phone restrictions play a large part in it. And I did have an experience at a school where they did not ban cell phones, and I witnessed firsthand students making very poor behavior decisions on their cell phone, which included not only included bullying, but also recording of incidents that were set up through the use of the cell phone.
I want to second everything you said, and I'm a big believer in having charter school autonomy and the ability of charter schools to make individual decisions. So I'm kind of wrestling with this, given my support for banning cell phones during instructional time. I mean, you mentioned truancy, mental health, and then educator retention as all priorities you have. I can see how all of those could be negatively impacted by cell phones. I mean, with the issue of truancy, with the issues we see of students being afraid to go to school, if cell phones are leading to more bullying, that could prevent our students from wanting to come to school. Mental health, we've heard about the mental health impacts of cell phones, of students being on them. And then educator retention, trying to retain teachers in an environment where there's this distraction, this ongoing distraction that they have to police. So I don't know where I stand on this issue for charter schools. I don't want to use up all your time, but I'm interested to see how you relate those challenges you talked about to potentially being improved by banning cell phones. Thank you. I'm out of time.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you all for your testimony. Mr. Smith, I hope that we can learn from your survey data when it does come through, but I wonder just preliminarily what you're hearing from teachers in particular. Are teachers pleased with this, or are they complaining about difficulty enforcing and so on?
So with the data that we have so far, I'm actually looking at it right now. Our teachers appreciate the policy, they're supportive of the policy. I think what you're starting to see with our teacher groups are one teacher maybe not enforcing it as much as another, and then those conversations happening at the school level. So that's, like I said, we're 16 to 17 weeks into this. Those are the things we're trying to let settle through the school year before we make a larger policy change. I will say, anecdotally, going out and talking to students, they understand and appreciate the policy, and a student just told me the other day, they were at home doing their homework and they put their cell phone away. That's their own choice, it's their own personal space, but because of their practices they're learning at high school, they've been able to implement that directly, and they kind of had an aha moment of, oh, I'm learning how to manage this device, and now I know to put it away when I'm doing my homework. So that was kind of a neat takeaway anecdotally from a student this past week.
Thank you. Mr. Hughes, how about you? What are you hearing from school leaders and teachers about what's going on in middle schools?
Overwhelmingly, everyone loves the fact that we don't allow cell phones during the instructional day in middle school. I actually, in the 2+ years I've supervised this cluster, I actually have not received any negative feedback around our collection of cell phones at arrival.
Yeah, thank you. I've just anecdotally, I've tried to talk to as many school leaders as I can about this, and none have regretted the restrictions they've placed. In fact, there's one high school principal who took phones from freshmen and sophomores and attributes that to almost elimination of fights that happened at the school during the school year. I guess we'll have to wait for more data as we implement, but I think the early signs seem to be encouraging. Thank you.
Representative O'Leary.
Thank you all for heeding the call. We're trying to find out information so that we can have a policy that will work for the city. Mr. Hughes, I want to thank you for leading the revolution in middle schools, because if it works, if it ain't broke in middle schools, then we need to fix it in the high schools and the elementary schools in DCPS. Because I wrote down distraction versus focus. I didn't let my students to have cell phones in the classroom, and it wasn't that long ago that I stopped teaching. And because I know how important it is for students to be able to read and write and compute in a classroom without distraction. And we know how much of a distraction this can be, and how important it is, and all of the information that it has. Mine's off, because I don't want to be distracted while I'm working, and I don't want my students to be distracted when they're working. So I really appreciate what's going on in the middle schools, and I hope that our school leaders understand that it can work. It has nothing to do with what happened in the pandemic. It has nothing to do with what happened before the pandemic. It has to do with right now. Almost all of our students have cell phones. And if they have it, they'll use it if it's in the classroom. If they don't have it in the classroom, they can focus on learning in the classroom and becoming smarter. And that's what the deal is. Mr. Smith, I don't know how much time I have. I know it's not too much. A minute. What pitfalls have occurred since your program started? Like 2 major problems that have happened that you're fixing.
With the policy implementation itself, I think we found that we need to clarify some of the language in there because that understanding between parents, students, and schools is essential for it to be consistent. So that was one of our areas of feedback is we are going to be reworking this policy to make sure that it's crystal clear to everyone what we thought was clear. And then there hasn't been anyone who's come up to me with a negative impact at the school level. We haven't had a parent reach out and say that this is impacting my kid negatively. We haven't had any of those conversations. Again, we're only 16 or 17 weeks in, but it really has just come down to clarification of message, communicating clearly, and setting expectations consistently across the board.
Thank you very much, because that's what's happening. Everybody, I mean, a lot of people have problems with it. They have problems with it, but you fixed it. And same thing happened at the middle schools. It's been fixed. It can happen. But there has to be the school leaders. The mayor is the school leader in our city. The mayor, he needs to jump on board of this revolution.
Thank you, Representative O'Leary. Representative Reed.
Good evening. So I have two questions and a statement, I think, for like research purposes. The first question is, what are the opportunities for digital citizenship using cell phones or other technology in either DCPS or charters? And I'm particularly thinking about our social studies standards and our social emotional learning standards. I have some sort of call outs in relation to either using technology to, or media to, do research, and then the other is kind of like using it, you know, in a way that's not bullying, et cetera. So that's my first question. The second one is, has DCPS or the charter networks been given any guidance from OSSI related to ed tech use? So if any of those questions resonate, and I'm probably going to cut somebody off it so I can make my statement. Go ahead.
I can respond to, I think the first question is really around like other ways having cell phones can be used in the classroom. I think having it when it's managed well with instructional staff, it allows students to have that ability to use creative thinking and to have an innovative approach to learning, which some educators may applaud and appreciate with the use. I know some educators have used TikTok to allow students to be able to access that type of site to create PSAs or different creative lessons that allow them to engage in a way that would be interactive with their peers. I also want to name that cell phones can also be an easy way for translation services to occur with students who where English is not their first language. And then instead of carrying a larger laptop around to help with translation services, it's a little more discreet to allow them to be able to communicate with their peers and with staff.
Our students at DCPS all take digital citizenship lessons, but they do it via the computer.
Okay. And then anything about the question about, is that my 50, am I in a minute?
No, you're good. You have
54
seconds.
Any guidance from OSSI related to ed tech, the use of ed tech or technology in?
I'm not sure about the answer to that question.
Okay. And then, so I guess I'll make my statement. I adjunct at Georgetown on Mondays, and I usually ask my students, what did you read this week? And one of my students, I didn't get the name of the article, so I hope staff can research this point. But I find it interesting we have Loudoun County as an expert panelist because she stated that one of the articles or piece of media that she read was that more affluent neighborhoods are moving towards banning cell phones. And I think about the dynamics of DC, and when I heard that, I was kind of, in preparing for this conversation, I was like, what are the elements of equity that are going to pop in, but also how do we remain responsive to the needs of our communities, living in front of an elementary school where I've seen parents rush to the building when something has happened in the community and knowing that it's probably more traumatic to not have them have a contact with their child. So not was just solely relying on the technology or communication from the school, and that also is talking to high school students being unreliable. So I guess I'll be curious if we can find any information related to if that's true from our staff, and think about the context of DC, and then how are we shoring up our schools and their ability to be able to get information to families, understanding the trauma that. yes, that our families may have incurred in while they have those responses to rush to the buildings.
Representative Williams.
Yes. Thank you to all the panelists. Mr. Hughes, I'd like to say thank you for the clarity which I've gotten from your testimony. You had said very simply in response to a fellow colleague, like there's no reason to use cell phones in classrooms, and kids have all the resources they need to be successful. I think that's the stance that we should continue to move to make sure, assuming kids have everything that they need, that they can be supported in being focused. And Mr. Smith, I appreciate the consistency that Loudoun County has been able to demonstrate across districts in promoting responsible use and digital citizenship, while also leading in being responsive to iterative community feedback. Ms. Travers, I have a couple questions for you. I also find your testimony very valid in some of the challenges that individual schools are having. And I'm kind of curious, whether it be from the Charter School Alliance or Public Charter School Board or even just with schools amongst themselves, how can we support schools in figuring out what works for them with not overwhelming them? Because I think if every school does feel like they're on an island and figuring out what works for them, without support, it can mean more money, it can mean more time, it can mean more headaches. So I'm just kind of curious what you think about that.
That's a great question. I thank you for flagging that. I think school leaders would appreciate, even if there was an option to have grant funding, if they decide to opt into that ban, having the financial resources to put that in place. Recently, I had a conversation with a school leader, and there is a ban that's within that LEA, and she named, if these lock boxes had charging stations, students would want to put their phones in there. They would be able to leave school with a fully charged phone and I see the head nods. So they would be excited to have that, right? And so I think if there's support in that way with infrastructure, also I think it was mentioned earlier with Ms. Anderson noting around the ban of specific sites, right? Just thinking through how to close the loop on having access to some of those social media sites that could create more harm and tension. And I would also name too that with the cell phones, our young people also have access to, I think there was a new pilot in DC of the 988 crisis hotline, and in that pilot of that, students were using that during the school day, which allowed them to gain access to therapeutic services where some LEAs do not yet have clinical resources they can tap into.
Thank you. I have another question, but I only have 30 seconds left, so I'm going to go to Dr. Annette Campbell-Anderson. But I am curious with the charter sector, like what the data looks like in terms of different policies across LEAs. Dr. Campbell-Anderson, could you just speak to, like, you're talking about data, and I'm really interested in getting more and better data. What particular pieces of data outside of just student use of cell phones do you think could be most instructive in setting district policy?
Well, thank you for your question. I would say, number one, what we know is that there are 18 states that have cell phone bans. So,
Thank
sorry.
you. Representative Patterson.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who came out tonight and to talk about this important subject. But I'm going to stick to my two that are talking about DC's ecosystem, public education ecosystem. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Hughes. My first question is, I know you have 13 schools in your particular cluster. Is you guys' policy across all middle schools? So the other clusters as well?
Yeah, yes, I have all 13 standalone middle schools, okay. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Okay. So I guess my questions would be, as you look at that, I was trying to find out, because what I appreciate about this more than anything is your statement about violence and things like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys did any kind of comparisons as far as violence at the schools who do not have this policy. Like you said, I know you've been asked somewhat, but is there any kind of studies in DCPS that talks about violence and cell phones with the other elementary schools or other high schools at all? Have you guys done any type of numbers, comparisons of what you guys are doing and how it compares with the other ones, is what I'm asking.
I love that idea, but I don't believe we've done a study like that just yet.
Okay.
But it's something we can definitely think about.
Because I'm very interested in the the cross between those different grade levels and schools because of the violence. I'm a person that has worked with violence. I've seen how phones are used as almost communication tools to have fights and to coordinate fights. In my regular job during the day, like fights can literally move based on intel that a student has received and move a fight to another location. So that's why that information is so important to me, is to kind of find out how we're looking at that and comparison across not only elementary schools but also high schools. I truly appreciate what you guys are doing in middle school. I think it's amazing, and I appreciate that.
Well,
So,
thank you.
now I want to turn to you, Ms. Travis. Thank you for coming here and representing the other side of our ecosystem, so we can talk in both ways. My question to you very quickly is, LEAs, I mean, most people don't know that charter schools are very different in size. You have large LEAs and small LEAs. You spoke a lot about cost. Can you give me very quickly who kind of advocated for it as far as big and small? As far as I know, it's a bigger cost for the smaller LEAs as opposed to a Friendship or a KIP who have a larger LEA. Can you speak to me like who does have these policies and who don't, based on size?
We did a sampling just from about 15 of our charters, and of those 15, they all have a band of some sort, whether it's self-select, they're collecting at the door, or they employ the honor system and have the actual boxes. But it's a variety of the large and small.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any more time really, so I'll follow up with you. Thank you.
Representative Thompson.
I have a couple different thoughts, which I'm not calling them questions because they're not really questions, but I would invite your thoughts and response. So one, in listening to the testimonies, I'm thinking about the difference between technology, like being without technology, being without phones, and then being without social media. Those are actually different things. There was an announcement today about the city actually getting a grant around digital equity to be able to invest in more devices. And in the different testimonies, I've also heard themes of mental health, self-regulation, the opportunity for device etiquette, and then someone said the words, what is developmentally appropriate? What I have not heard anybody talk about is just the difference when we are talking about young people and how their minds are developing, which we've seen some studies around social media. I don't know if we have as much information around tech use. And so a lot of the positive things that we attribute to tech use, I do think should be, I would say, segmented out from, does that mean kids have to be on their phones? Or should they be allowed social media bans? Like, those are different things, because I sat on this dais and I text one of my colleagues that I was reminded how much I'm going to miss Representative O'Leary when he leaves, right? I would acknowledge that it's probably not what we want kids to be doing in classes, and if I didn't have my phone, I couldn't do that. But we are using tech right now to advance our meeting goals and agendas, and so while someone might be without a phone, that is not necessarily the same as without tech. And so I'm just curious, like, how we're thinking about when it comes to equity, when it comes to what is developmentally appropriate. Are we making those distinctions in our policies and where we might need investments? Or are there points where we're conflating because it all comes to our phone and is in our hand? I don't know if anybody has thoughts, but that's why I said it was not really a question.
Well, again, I'll just reiterate that in our middle schools, our kiddos have ample opportunities to use technology. My worry with the cell phone is not only about the social media aspect of the cell phone, but also kiddos play video games on their phone. We just want to have an environment, a learning environment that's distraction-free. And in terms of being able to use tech, again, there's plenty of tech in our schools.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I believe that I'm the last one. It's the round of member questions. So I'm not going to come back to Executive Director Butler to say everyone's time is up. Instead, I'm going to thank everyone from their testimony this evening. I'm also going to encourage members to follow up if they have additional thoughts or questions. And I'm going to encourage folks who are not with us tonight to give us their feedback. I would remind us that our job as the State Board is not to set a policy for everyone else, but we did have this panel to think about like what's out there. And so thank you all for sharing with us what's out there. I believe that we now have a break. I'm gonna say 5 minutes. Y'all are not gonna come back in 5 minutes because we do this every single time. So I'm going to say that let's be back at 7 o'clock. It is 6:52. So we will be back to hear from public witnesses at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Get ready for the season. You going on this one? I am.
Okay, yes.
This is your 1-minute warning. Correction, 30 seconds. I'm not doing it. I love how you wait till I'm about to reconvene everybody to be like, we hear testimony from public witnesses at every public meeting. All right, I'm going to try that again. We hear testimony from public witnesses at every public meeting, and your comments become part of our official record. If you would like to speak at a future public meeting, which includes a virtual option, please sign up on our website at sboe.dc.gov or contact our staff by email at sboe@dc.gov or by phone at 202-741-0888. Tonight, we have 13 witnesses who have submitted public testimony. We will hear from those in attendance in a panel format. Looks like 5 will be on the panel at a time. Each witness will have up to 3 minutes to provide comments. If you are with us in person, please note that you must use one of the microphones at the table, and they are already on. After our public witnesses speak, we will pause for questions from board members. Members will have 3 minutes for questions for our public witnesses. And here's that friendly reminder again, those 3 minutes do include the question or comment and their answer. Director Butler will call the public witnesses in groups and announce the question rounds. She will also assist with timing to ensure our witnesses and board members stay within their allotted time. Director Butler, please call the public witnesses.
Okay, I will call the first 5 public witnesses. Jasmine Tamaloko, Lindsay Pullum. Are either of these individuals here? Okay. Scott Goldstein, Jacqueline Walker, Anna Rodriguez. So, okay, why didn't I name them? Do we have all 5? Is Jasmine online? Jasmine is not here, so I will go to the next person. Sherm Boone Ruffin. Are they online? Taisha Andrews. Okay. All right, we will start with Lindsay.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Lindsay Pullum. I am speaking on behalf of the YMCA DC Youth in Government. It's a teen program offered to middle schoolers and high schoolers by the YMCA of Metropolitan Washington. For over 2 decades, Youth in Government has provided transformative experiences for hundreds of DC students, equipping them with the skills and knowledge to make a difference in their communities and beyond. Students learn firsthand how to research issues, write legislation, debate effectively, and advocate for change. This hands-on experience cultivates lifelong civic participation and strengthens our democracy. Last year alone, this program served nearly 400 students across all 8 wards through high school and middle school delegations. Some of them are here with me tonight. In recent years, a large percentage of DC students have been chronically absent or truant, And more than just imparting knowledge, Youth in Government is a solution to the issues facing our DC students. To start, Youth in Government brings government to life, bringing to life those theoretical courses and concepts in school with fun activities and quarterly events. Take, for example, Roosevelt High School has a Government and Diplomacy NAF Academy, and those students who take coursework in government then apply it through mock trial and legislative weekend. Events like our January mock trial teach students how to be lawyers. Students are then introduced to career paths of being a lawyer. Or take our legislative weekend, where students learn public policy and identify problems in their communities and come up with creative solutions. All working all day long. Afterwards, they come together and fellowship with one another, and there's a deep sense of camaraderie. So I'm here to request support to help any interested schools participate in our programming. Support could include field trip permissions and entrance fee funding for any participating schools. Supporting our events creates broader opportunities for students to learn about civics and their government, and this will develop workplace readiness and instill a sense of agency and responsibility to the DC community. Introducing students to the importance of civic engagement will give students a sense of agency and create a pipeline for future leaders whose responsibility will create future leaders that better reflect the diversity of our society. Thank you. I yield my time to the floor.
Go, Scott.
Good evening. I'm glad you're holding this conversation today on school cell phone policies. I bring three perspectives to this conversation. As a father who's looking to protect my daughters, a former high school teacher who has dealt with evolving school policies on phones, and the executive director of Empower Ed, where we have sought educator input on this topic. My view on this has evolved over time, but I now absolutely think it's time for DC to adopt a citywide policy on cell phones in schools. People who think teachers just aren't doing good enough job engaging students or need to do more to educate kids on proper phone use are out of touch with the daily realities of classroom today, brain science, and the mental health crisis. One, yes, we absolutely have to teach students digital literacy, but they don't need their personal devices with them all day to do that. I didn't bring a computer to school every day to learn typing. We should use school devices and intentionally teach digital literacy. Two, good teaching is about taking students on a learning journey. They should be about student inquiry and critical thinking. That's a process that, when done well, takes time, not instant gratification. Trying to compete with instant dopamine hits of phones compels bad teaching. Three, I hear the argument that we will have phones in life, so we need to prepare them. But that's not all we need to prepare them for. We need to prepare them to read, write, think mathematically, scientifically, and develop socially and emotionally. Phones in schools undermine all of the other goals. Four, as a parent, I get the real fears about securities, emergencies like school shootings or community trauma. But as someone who works with schools, I know the answer is to improve communication systems to communicate equitably and timely with all families in emergencies. Further, there's now good evidence that students being on phones during shootings and other emergencies makes the emergencies worse. While it's great that they get to send texts to families, at the moment they need to be most present and alert to the threat, people are instead texting or recording. Five, student violence. I've heard the argument that it's good that we have phones to document abuses, fights, or to protect certain students. As a former teacher, here's my perspective. When a fight breaks out and students take out their phones, it makes violence a sport. They're entertained rather than helping. That is bad. Six, finally, there is no argument that outweighs the absolutely clear and abundant evidence that cell phones in schools promotes anxiety, depression, bullying, violence, and robs students of a space in which they should be free of all of that. And it's not okay. Empower Ed recently worked with a school through our educator wellness partnerships, and one of their top wellness goals for their staff was to ban cell phones. The leadership listened, and no other single factor made as much of a difference in boosting educator morale and allowing for them to focus on teaching and learning. I know that it's complicated. We have to talk about students with disabilities and the device needs they have. We need to talk about tech equity and students being able to do research in class, and we absolutely need to talk about community trauma in different communities and how we connect that policy. But I hope our city leaders will talk to teachers, students, parents, and families, but also educate them. Our natural reactions or personal perspective may not consider all the factors raised here. Other jurisdictions are moving fast. Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, was a wake-up call, and it should be. It's time for DC to follow suit and protect our kids, protect learning, and protect the safe space of school.
Jacqueline Walker. Anna Rodriguez.
Good evening. My name is Ana Rodriguez, and I'm a proud parent of a ninth grader who attends McKinley Tech High School. in Ward 5. I also serve as the McKinley Parent Teacher Organization President and with PAVE Parents Amplifying Voices in Education on a citywide board and Ward 5 Parent Leader in Education. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am excited to share my thoughts on the importance of removing cell phones from our schools. I'm here to urge the State Board to advocate for the removal of cell phones from our schools and to implement a social media literacy curriculum in our schools. My daughter is a high school student at McKinley Tech. This past Halloween, my daughter dressed up as Garfield and headed to school. While she was in the hallway, another student came up to her and punched her in the stomach while a different student filmed the incident. My daughter's epileptic, and the punch could have caused serious harm. When I picked my daughter up from school that day, she was more worried about the video circulating on social media than about being punched at school. This is just one example on how the proliferation of the phone has led to increased distractions, cyberbullying, and safety concerns. By limiting cell phone use in our schools, we can create a learning environment that is focused on learning and not what may be posted on social media. I understand the safety concerns that arise when students have restricted access to their cell phones. I urge the State Board to ensure that schools are equipped with the tools they need to keep our students safe. This means that the classroom doors, locks, bells work, and the intercom is functioning properly. Not only is physical safety important, but ensuring our students understand how to stay safe online is crucial. Students have access to social media at an impressionable time in their lives. They must understand that what they say and do online will follow them for the rest of their lives. Ensuring that there's a district-wide initiative aimed at increasing students' understanding of their digital footprint equips students with the information they need to make smart and safe decisions when they do not have access to their phones. Keeping students safe should be on top priority. Removing cell phones from the classroom and increasing digital footprints awareness helps to keep our students safe, both in and out of the classroom. I urge the State Board to keep this in mind as they continue their work. I look forward to continuing to advocate for school safety and partnering to improve the student experience. Thank you for your time and your partnership, Anna.
Thank you. Taisha Andrews.
Thank you. I'd first like to start off by saying my original testimony is very extensive, so I tried to chop it down as much as possible for tonight. My name is Taisha Andrews, and I'm a Ward 8 resident. I'm a proud parent of 2 children who attend Plummer and McKinley Tech. I'm a parent leader with PAVE, a citywide and Ward 8 PLE board member. I'm also the first vice president of the McKinley Tech Educational Campus PTO and a parent LSAT member for Plummer Elementary. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm proud to share my voice on why DCPS continuously falls behind the rest of the country regarding academic achievement due to the lack of specialized school programs, safe passage, and mental health services. DCPS continuously needs to catch up with the rest of the country in academics because the powers that be fail to procure, invest, and ensure the implementation of educational funds. While schools in Wards 3 and 4 continue to soar due to their financial and political influence communities, many of our schools in Wards 7 and 8 are left behind. Starting with the smallest acts, there needs to be better access to specialized school programs across the city and better oversight to ensure schools are properly implementing their prospective programs. Although my eldest son excels at McKinley Tech in Ward 5, I wish Tech had at least one additional campus closer to our home. Amari has to take Metro to and from school daily. Why has the city yet to create another school just like McKinley east of the river that will be more convenient? The Metro east of the river needs to be safer when kids are applying to when kids are applying to out-of-area specialized schools, they should be provided with transportation due to it not being safe. Moving forward, I'm sure you know that in 2022, the PACE module was used to decide what schools need the most building services. According to DCPS and DGS via the 2022 PACE recalculation overview, the categories used to determine schools with the most need are facility condition, demand, community need, and equity. In addition, and I quote, it states, Plummer Elementary has the most significant change, moved from number 24 to number 33. This is likely due to their nearly 10% average enrollment decrease over the last 5 years and a more recent modernization open parentheses, phase 1 modernization, close parentheses, compared to other schools on the PACE list. DGS requests for plumber have been put on hold despite consistently placing orders for heating issues. About 3 years ago, DCPS facilities spoke to a team of teachers, but nothing really occurred. I've been advocating for plumber to be placed on the revitalization list for about 3 years. Yeah, I'm running out of time. Okay. I'll skip. We should also consider the mental health issues overall that have increased nationally since the pandemic. Some families need mental health support for themselves to take better care of and provide for their children. If parents are not in a great mental space, you cannot expect them to ensure their children are in school on time. We have to first get our children to this sanctuary called school. While truancy rates have dropped, DCPS has a chronic absenteeism rate. My apologies, I'm sorry it's so long. But yes, please, if you get a chance, please read it in its entirety. And if you have any questions or concerns, I'm here to answer.
Thank you. And just also a reminder before we go to member questions that if you have not submitted a copy of your testimony and you will be testifying tonight, please email the staff at SBOE@dc.gov or just hand your written testimony to the staff and we will put it online for you. We are going to start with our student representative, Representative Mayer.
Thank you all so much for being here to provide public testimony. I would want to start with Mr. Goldstein and Ms. Rodriguez. Both of you expressed a lot of concern about phones in schools, and I'm curious what solutions would look like from your perspective, both as a parent for you, Ms. Rodriguez, and from an educator perspective, Mr. Goldstein.
Well, I think kids learning more education about, I used to work for Google. And the thing is to push the product, but there's never educating you on what the product does. And so when kids are coming into school, it's like this shiny thing, and it's something they keep paying attention to. So they'll focus on learning it, of what the use of the phone is for. I think that would be a great thing for the school to do before they even try to implement them to even have phones in the school.
I mean, there's a lot of things we can do on collection. I know an advocate, Laura Derringer, sent a packet today, which is very extensive about the different methods that different schools use. I'll say though why my view evolved a little bit from as a teacher and over the past few years is I do think we've made strides on digital equity to some degree. I mean, one of the concerns that I had as a teacher was I need my students to do research right now, and they're in the middle of a project, and I don't have laptops, and they do have their phones. So I need them to keep their phones so that they're able to do their work that they're able to do. And the closer we get to digital equity, the less that's a concern. And so it's good to avoid the downsides of all of it that I talked about around mental health, around bullying and violence. If we do really have digital equity and we really have devices in the classrooms, and I'm not fighting over one cart for the whole hallway. So the closer we get to digital equity, the less we should be dependent on the phones.
Thank you. I do agree with that. And Ms. Andrews, I want to give you a little more time to elaborate on your concerns about mental health, because that is one of my priorities, and I want to hear your thoughts and any recommendations you have.
So the basic point for my mental health portion is that since the pandemic, there are a lot of families struggling mentally. A lot of families don't have the means to reach out and get the mental support that they need. So for parents and families who are suffering from mental health supports, it's going to be hard for them to be able to care for their child and get them to school and be a concerned parent if they're not in a great mental space. So you can't expect the children to be at school in a good mental space when their household isn't even in a good mental space. So there needs to be something set up where DCPS is reaching out to the families in a capacity where we're assisting with those mental health issues, not just with the students, but their families and hopefully staff as well.
I agree with that, and this is a really big question, so it's okay if you don't have like a fleshed out answer, but do you have a vision for what that would look like for parents?
I do actually, and it's probably far off, but my vision for that would be...
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. The time is up.
No.
I'll read the rest of your testimony.
Representative Ting.
Could you finish that statement you were saying? Or could you finish that statement you were saying then?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, my idea around that would be for each individual school to have their own mental health team. And that mental health team would essentially be a main psychologist or psychiatrist at the school that has a team of other therapists or administrators that work under them to basically oversee all of the children and reach out to families that may need additional mental health services. So basically, like each school will have their own mental health facility within the school instead of whenever a child, needs to see a counselor, oh, go to the counselor's office. No, we're going to give you a pass to go to the school psychologist to see if they can take you in and maybe provide some resources for you and your family. So basically like an in-house psychology office in each individual school. That's my vision.
Okay, I see. Thank you. And then I have a question for Mr. Scott Walker. Could you provide more context about the study which showed that phone use is detrimental to students' health in emergencies?
That was me.
Yeah, the study that said that like during emergencies, having phones distracts students and makes them less safe.
Yeah, I can send you a resource on this because part of it I posted. But there have been a lot of statements from law enforcement in the immediate aftermath of several school shootings to that effect. There was a study I linked you to that I can share later. I don't have it with me, but I think this has come up in several school shooting scenarios that have happened in the past few years, where law enforcement have said after the fact that it was really detrimental to their immediate response, that everyone was distracted with phones and not present.
All right, thank you. And then, I guess to follow up, how has for the interplay between digital equity and that, do you imagine that do you think that DC should have specific skills and should have a curriculum from elementary, middle, and high school? What is the difference between cell phone use and digital literacy that you want for those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we need to be fully teaching digital literacy at every level. And I do think digital literacy has to not just be on a computer. I think we have to teach them tablets and phones and other things too. So I do think we need phones in some capacity because there are apps and we need to figure out how they manage that and AI and other things. But I do think we should be relying on devices that exist and not personal devices, but we absolutely should have a curriculum. We have to teach them all those things. And in some ways, then students who are studying that would get the privilege of being on those devices during the school day for an academic development purpose.
All right, thank you.
Representative Barnes.
Thank you all for your testimonies today. So first I want to go to Ms. Rodriguez. Definitely good seeing the Pay family here tonight. What happened to you and your daughter definitely should not happen, especially, with what's going on. Her focus should not instantly be on if someone is posting on social media. Her focus should be on her safety, her security, and simply her overall well-being. So I'm definitely apologize that happened to you. And, if we didn't have cell phones, that could not happen. Surprisingly, I am saying that. But it is true, if we didn't have cell phones, that would not, be the case. And so I definitely, applaud you for taking the opportunity to speak on that. And we often see a trend here of every time, we see a fight, we see an incident that happens in the street. Oftentimes, as young people, what they tend to do is they record, they post it on social media, they put it in the group chats, and it becomes something that's, like you said, more entertainment rather than, asking if the individual is all right. So I definitely want to see some change with that, with the usage of, cell phones. And then I just want to ask, what are some, alternative solutions that you want to see instead of because I'm not going to lie to you, once again, I'm against taking all these cell phones. So what are some alternative solutions as far as not, within the class, specifically within the class and within the school building, what are some things that you want to actually see happen?
So parents always, I'm a parent, so I'm always worrying if something happens, how can I get a hold of my child?
Ms. Rodriguez, I'm just going to interrupt you so you can speak into the
sorry.
mic. Sorry.
So me as a parent, I am one of those one that will run to the building if I hear something. And you always hear something going on around the building. But I just think if the kids, we're at McKinley Tech. The kids have laptops, the kids can email their parents. How come they don't have email access where they can email while they're in class or something going on. As far as cell phones, I think that should be an earned thing. I don't think that should be everyone's right to have. So for those kids that are exceeding or doing the right, and they're proving that they can have a phone and put it away and not take it out, that could be an initiative. I can see that working, but they say that everyone has a phone in class. I don't think that's a good idea. That's just me as a parent.
Understandable. And then for Ms. Andrews, hearing you say, that, do we have a lot of resources that are lacking, specifically within the Ward 8, Ward 7 area? And then not only that, but you're saying you can literally see an entire difference. Those schools up there, Ward 5, 4, all them areas, but here you see a totally different area. I have 15 seconds. I see the exact same thing, okay? And I want to ensure that you understand we do need that here. We do need that, within these different wards who, don't have things, because we often see more drought there. So maybe if we bring that light to that darkness, we can see something different.
Thank you. Representative Chang.
Thank you all. Dr. Pullum, you named at the end an ask around aid from the state board through curriculum adoption, field trip support, communication outreach and promotion, as well as funding. And so wanted to hear a bit more about what that would look like, and if you could wave a magic wand, what would that look like in detail?
Yeah, I'll actually start with maybe the smallest way to help is we have middle schools who want to come to citywide events, and I'll just use Hart Middle School as an example out in Ward 8. They had 20 students who want to participate in our fall and spring events, and we can't get them a bus to just go downtown for 3 hours. It could be something as small as that. Our middle school program, 100% of them had free or reduced lunch on their intake form, and 75% of them are Title I schools. So just getting them the ability to participate in the smallest way, right? So we're not necessarily charging middle schools to participate, but we didn't have funding for a bus and didn't have access to a bus company that was DCPS insured. So helping us just overcome the logistics of willing schools who want to come, like letting them. Long term, I think curriculum investment in specifically the 8th and 12th grade classes that are geared towards DC history or DC government, that feels like a pie in the sky dream goal where civic engagement and curriculum development can maximize experiential learning, which is coincidentally this conversation about cell phones. Like, you can't be on a cell phone and be debating and talking to your peers across the city at the same time. So I think the belonging and the learning that we want to have comes from experiences, and such an experience exists, and it would be awesome if schools had the ability to engage that curriculum and live out those mandatory classes.
Does the program receive any city funding currently?
It does not.
Okay, thank you. And I have a lot of questions about cell phones that will not be answered in 45 seconds, so I will follow up after. Thank you.
Representative Goulet.
I want to thank you all for being here tonight. The innovative courses you're talking about for both in school and out of school, I think that's hugely important for reducing truancy. So I fully support what you're both speaking about there. But I do want to talk about what Mr. Goldstein talked about here and Ms. Rodriguez. Here's how I think we should do this. I mean, this is kind of an issue that everybody seems to mostly agree upon here. And in January, I'd like to see us pass a resolution supporting a proposal similar to what DCPS has in middle schools right now, so that we have a ban in place during school hours for both the elementary and high school level as we enter school year 25-26. I think it should be done as a matter of policy, not as a statute, because this is something you probably want to change regularly as technology evolves. You don't want to have this in DC code or anything. So I think the right place to do it, and it's already been done successfully, is in the DCPS middle schools. So, and then DME, I think, could work with the charters to get them hopefully to the same place. The reason I think it's urgent is that we want to also be responsive to the issue the charter's raised, which is that this could impose a cost on some of our smaller charter schools. So if there's a way to get some one-time money in the budget, which will be coming out in March or April, that would be a good thing to do so, some one-time funds to pay for a place to store these cell phones during the day. So I just kind of want Mr. Goldstein particularly get your reaction to that timeline and see what you thought about that, because it seems like we are kind of behind other jurisdictions on this.
I think it's good. It's moved fast. I think because of that book in particular and other things that have raised this, the amount of states that are instituting this. So I think it's good that we move in that direction. I think you're right that policy is the right place for it to live so it can adapt. I'll give one example of it, the need for adaptation. Switching to my parent hat, which is I have an 8-year-old, about to be 9 years old. She walks home by herself now from school. And so we're thinking about like how do we make sure that she's safe and doing that and becoming more independent. So there's watches that you can only call like 2 people, right? It has like a couple buttons and like that's all you can do. So it's not a smart device, there's no social media on it. It's just for her parents, right, to be able to see where she is and contact her. So we have to be particular about what kind of tech we're talking about too. Like are those kind of watches okay? So that parents can have that safety, but we're not talking about cell phone use. So I think policy is the right place so we can make all these finite adjustments to it as we go.
Well, thank you all for your testimony, Mr. Rodriguez. A very powerful story. I think it also supports this. I'm sorry your daughter experienced that, but hopefully we'll get something done in the new year here on this quickly. So thank you all for coming out today.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you all. I want to come back to the idea of digital equity, which I agree, Mr. Goldstein, we have made some progress, but this discussion does underscore how important it is to make sure that all of our classrooms are equitably equipped. And I also want to raise that we received written testimony from a student from School Without Walls, Perry Pixley Chamberlain, who raised the issue of the DCPS firewall and how that might need to be adjusted to make sure that students can research, as you were saying, Mr. Goldstein. Students need to use their devices to do research. We need to make sure that they're able to do that. And that might require fine-tuning at different levels. Mrs. Andrews, I received your full written testimony. It is very long, but I read it, and it's really powerful. It says a lot, and I think it speaks to a conversation that we've been having about what is high-quality education, about equity in our city, and I would just like to voice my appreciation for what I see is a pretty serious critique of decades of choices that we've made as a city and the ramifications that we're living with now. And just invite my colleagues to read the full statement. It is worth your time. And invite you to just continue speaking into this broader conversation. And to, like, you give some very specific recommendations and ideas that are narrow, but you're also speaking to like at the broadest level. And so I would just, is there any time left? Yes. So just like at the biggest picture level, like you're saying, like the city is behind and we've failed to, the powers that be have failed to procure, invest, and ensure implementation of educational funds. Like at that biggest, broadest level, what would you like to see? Like what's your dream?
My dream would be for all students in the city to be able to use DC School Connect to transport themselves to and from school regularly. My goal would be also, like I said, to have a psychology or psychiatrist facility in every school, DCPS school. My goals would be to increase tutoring and out-of-school time services for students, for them to have more interaction, not only within school, but outside of school as well, because tutoring and out-of-school time programs help children to develop academically and mentally as well, and that's very important.
Yes.
Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry. Yes, ma'am. Representative O'Leary.
Thank you. Ms. Andrews, you got one other short thought? Something came to you, I thought.
I was trying to get my words out, but it's okay.
Okay. I wanted to ask you a question before. You were talking about specialized instruction for students. The graduation requirements, we're working with OSSI on the new graduation requirements. I would encourage you to come back to testify. We're going to have parental meetings with the community, and we want as much input as possible so that our students can follow their passions rather than the Carnegie units that are in place for the last 120 years. Thank you. Mr. Goldstein, you know that I had something to do with the panel on the cell phones, and DCPS just had a perfect model in the middle schools as what all the other schools in the city could do as far as cell phones. What can teachers do to start raising their voices so that the leaders know about how important it is for us to have some type of policy so that students don't have their phones in the classroom during class time?
The first thing is testify tonight, so you'll have several teachers testifying in the panel after this, and then several that submitted written testimony. So just listening to the perspectives they're sharing later tonight, and we'll continue to share with you all. And I think listening to the real experiences in terms of the implementation of it and how it works. What are the power struggles? What is better in terms of, is it the yonder pouches? Is it the collection? What are the challenges with each? How much time is consumed at the beginning of the day when admin do it versus it happening in the classroom? What happens when there's a 5-minute break between classes and we're having to transition if we do it that way? Listen to every scenario, right? And just listen to the teachers share their experiences, because I do think there's middle grounds on policy. We could decide there's a ban, we're all going to do it the exact same way, or we could decide we don't have phones during the instructional day, and here's a menu of 10 ways we cannot have phones during the instructional day, and allow schools to choose among those things. And it might be different from level to level or from school to school and how they choose to implement it, but we need to give them the support to do it. But there's a lot of particulars that teachers struggle with every day in enforcing a policy like that I just think the board needs to listen to as it makes the policy.
Because we have one of my schools in Ward 4, Whittier, is an elementary school. But at Whittier, the students come in and they all put their cell phones in a tub.
Yeah.
And they take the tub to the office, and they don't have their phones all day. And then at dismissal, they bring the tub out, and they all go into the tub and pick up their phones and go home. And that works, all right? And what Mr. Hughes was talking about in the middle schools, now there's a policy. It's not the same policy in all the schools. It's just am I done? Oh, sorry.
Okay. Representative Reed.
I yield to Representative O'Leary. Just kidding. Thank y'all for coming out. I keep thinking about something that I read. I think it was in Naeem Akbar's Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery, where he was talking about what looks like a hypervigilant response by particularly Black parents with some things just related to like student health, where one minor cold, I'm keeping them home. Shooting in the community, I'm running to the school, because it's deeply ingrained in, and I don't want to get deep, but slavery. And you just see it in different evolutions now. So I am worried about, because again, I get to see those parents who something pops off in the community, they're running to the door of the school. It's causing probably more disturbance at the school building, but we can't ignore those parents. So I'm curious, what would be a trauma-informed preparation for parents should we move to banning cell phones in schools?
I I can answer.
Mhm.
Even though my testimony wasn't about the ban, I actually agree with the banning of the cell phones. And I think that it should be banned completely for elementary school students, because what is an elementary school student doing with a cell phone anyway? And I think that for middle school and high school, they should follow something similar to what McKinley does. When the children arrive at McKinley, they are required to lock their phones up. They have individual like cell phone lockers.
Ms. Andrews, how did McKinley prepare you for that transition? Because
that one more time.
how did McKinley prepare you for that expectation of when your child goes to school, this is going to happen? I'm trying to like take the preparation
Gotcha.
pieces.
I mean,
yeah.
so they basically sent us emails, and also they presented it in the orientation. They presented it to all of the parents and families during the student orientation before school even started, and they sent emails out as well. So we were well informed before the first day of school that our children were going to be required to lock their phones up as soon as they walked in the building, and they don't get them until the end of the day when they're leaving the building.
Can I share something about the trauma-informed thing, which is, I think we have to get better at communication with parents when emergencies happen. And I think we're really not good at that in a lot of schools now, and it causes a lot of stress among staff, causes a lot of stress among families. And there is, especially I would say in DCPS from the schools we work with, this hierarchy to being able to say anything to parents in the moment an emergency happens that is really destructive. Which is like, we're not allowed to say anything until it's gone up 3, 4, 5 rungs of approval. And so there's chaos. People are sharing rumors about the things that is happening. Some people know what's happened. Some people don't know what's happened, while the principal waits hours for approval from Central to say anything to parents.
And that's what I've heard talking to students.
We can't do that. We have to get that bureaucracy out of the way and let parents know what's happening fast.
Yes, and that's what I've heard from students of my parent can get information to me about what happened in the community faster than my teacher can. So that's something that we're going to have to work on. Ms. Rodriguez, did you have anything you wanted to say?
So like, I'm PTO president, so I am privileged to go to the safety meetings at the school. So like, we had an incident, we had an incident at McKinley Tech. But for me because I have because I'm able to go into that meeting, and sit with staff and Stafford and all them and really have that conversation. I feel comfortable when I have my PTO to say that I think we also have a safety committee. Ty is my first VP. And so I feel comfortable as a parent when I'm talking to at the PTO to say that with us not having the cell phones, we're fine.
Gotcha.
Can I?
And I'm sorry, that's my time.
No worries. I'm just gonna. So I know that the the virtual format is new, and we no longer have the clock at the table. But a quick cheat code: if you are on the dais and your eyes are great enough, you can see the clock in front of you. That is the clock we are using. If you are a panelist, you should look behind me, and you can use that clock that is above you. And that way, Director Butler won't have to interrupt you. Now, we will let you go over a few seconds if you want to finish your statement, but it helps a lot not being caught in like the middle of a sentence, because we do want to hear people's full thoughts. So I just want to say that as a quick housekeeping note. I also want to remind folks to speak into the microphone, because just because you can hear yourself in this room does not mean people who are watching on the broadcast can hear you. And so in addition to finishing your thoughts, we want people to hear you. I'm going to turn it back over to Director Butler.
Representative Williams.
Yeah, thank you, President Thompson, for the reminder. Representative Reed, do you have anything to finish with regards to? All right, cool. Yeah, did you want to finish, Ms. Rodriguez?
I was just saying that as a parent, my hat is parent right now.
Yeah.
I learned through McKinley Middle, because my daughter was at McKinley Middle, so I kind of like was guided to McKinley Tech. That doesn't guarantee my child goes to McKinley Tech, but I was already used to in middle school that phone was taken before they even went into their classrooms. My experience with DCPS has been great with them telling us as parents the importance of the kids not having their phone. And I experienced me personally, of my own friends going to support them while their children were harmed and videotaped. And then for me to have to go through it, like I'm going to help someone to sit in a meeting where their son was beat up and it was videoed, and the parent sees it on Instagram. So then for me to go advocate for that, and then to have to experience it too, that's why I'm like, I'm fine with them, with this ban of putting the phones. I mean, until kids understand that this can, for the rest of their life, this can do something to them. Like what the decisions they make now might not be the decisions they make tomorrow, but I don't think our kids should be put in that vulnerable stage, you know, with equipment that can do damage to them.
Yeah, I understand that, and I appreciate like kind of the hat you wear there with also, you know, with OSA, and then also the involved role in the Parents Association. So thank you, Dr. Pullum. I love the Ward 1 YMCA. I'm a member of the gym there. I live right across the street, and I want to follow up on Representative Chang's question. So was the concern, or you had mentioned logistics, but then you had mentioned that there were challenges with buses and funding. So like in terms of students accessing your programming, like what are the steps that could help facilitate that?
Yeah, so the one I mentioned was bus services for middle schools. Those are the ones who primarily need busing to and from different events. Funding, coincidentally, McKinley Tech High School is one of our programs, and making sure that students who need scholarships to participate have scholarship funding to participate. And we were really fortunate that another nonprofit stepped in called Live It, Learn It, who helped provide certain scholarships for McKinley Tech students. But those are the two big logistic hurdles is transportation and just entrance fees. Coincidentally, one of the upcoming logistics issues is getting instructional superintendent approval for overlapping field trips that coincide with end of term, I don't know what that's called, end of term things.
I'm over time, but that couples with kind of what Mr. Goldstein was saying about like cutting through layers of the bureaucracy. And I appreciate that. And I'm also a DC history teacher, so I'm happy to collaborate on that visionary work of expeditionary learning.
Okay. Representative Best.
Oh, yeah. All right. All right, so first, Lindsay, good to meet you in person. I owe you an email, but I definitely want to talk to you more about the Civics Education Week proposal. So I'll connect with you about that. Representative Goulet, I know this is kind of a response to something that you've been mentioning. I know you've talked about like how DCPS had like a model, I guess, way that they go about it. But I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that DCPS bans it in middle school, but also allows it schools to have their own policy in high school. Guys, phones aren't evil. Banning cell phones isn't necessarily the answer. It's a temporary solution that overlooks the importance of teaching students self-discipline and responsible use of technology. And so, like, I get everything, and I hear some of the things that you've been saying. So I understand, the distractions that are there too. But we have to also make sure that we're looking at the root cause of everything as well. Scott, I had a question for you. Are your teachers asking for a total ban or bans with caveats? So like time and place, locations, pouches, apps, flexibility. Like what have you been hearing?
Yeah, so we put this out to teachers at the beginning of the year when you all had a first very preliminary discussion about it, and we got about 20, 30 teachers to respond to it. So that's the sample. I would say in that, the vast majority, 9 and 10, wanted some form of a ban, right, or a prohibition from using it during the school day, but there's variation in what kind and like how it should be taken, and should it be during the class period or should it be for the full instructional day. So I want to let the teachers who testify share their own perspectives on that and not speak for all of them. But so I think there's some variation in that.
Fair enough. Thank you. I'm done.
Representative Patterson.
Thank you. Very quickly, only these 3 minutes. I will say to you, Ms. Rodriguez, I've met your daughter, so I'm very sorry that your daughter had to go through that, especially after the things that I know concerning your daughter. So I'm very sorry to hear that, first and foremost. Then I'm going to turn my attention to Ms. Andrews. Ms. Andrews, from what I wrote down, proud Ward 8 resident like myself and Dr. Reed, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you send your children to Plummer, where you're on the LSAT, correct?
Correct.
And McKinley, which are both outside of Ward 8, correct?
Yes.
So you made a conscious decision to take your children to a school outside Ward 8, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I would like you to kind of very quickly speak to your rationale as a parent why you picked those schools.
Why I picked those schools? Well,
Yeah.
for Plummer, that school was chosen for my son because he went through the Strong Start program in early stages, and he was placed at Plummer, and he's been excelling ever since. I was hesitant to send him there at first due to my past knowledge of the school. However, he has been doing great and excelling. He is only 8 years old in the 3rd grade, and he's already reading on the 8th grade level, still with his IEP. So, and he's doing multiplication tables already. He knows the majority of them already at 8 years old because we don't stop at school. We teach him at home as well. He is soaring. He is really excelling.
I love
so
that.
I appreciate that early stages did place him at Plummer because I do not think he would have gotten that same educational experience at our home elementary school, which is Patterson Elementary. I refuse to send my children there.
Okay. I appreciate that. And tell me about McKinley.
Yes, McKinley, because my son is a tech head.
Okay.
My husband and I wanted him to go to Walls, but he is deep into computer science and technology, video games, all of the what do you call it, the graphics, like animated movies and things like that. He's really into those things, so that was his goal to go to McKinley Tech, so we just allowed him to do it. Although we don't like the fact that it's so far, even though Walls is far even further. We don't like the travel, but we appreciate his experience.
And I ask you those questions very simply because I know how involved you are. I know how the decisions that a parent makes when they're placing their child in a particular school and everything. And it speaks to the very reason last month that I was talking about, and I appreciate my colleague, Representative Henderson, about quality schools and about programming and equity and things like that. It's the very reason I think a lot of people got caught up last month in legalities about a quality education as a civil rights, but you're exactly, and your testimony is exactly what I'm trying to do. So I appreciate your testimony and you bragging on your babies today. Thank you.
President Thompson.
First, of course, Ms. Rodriguez, I'm so sorry. It's 4 very different testimonies, right? I'll say, Ms. Pullum, you are welcome to actually come if you want to talk to some principals. We are having a Ward 7 principal meet and greets on December 18th. It is open to all. I will send you the invitation. It is also on my social media, so you're welcome to come to that. It is free and open to the public, but it's a great opportunity to talk to school leadership. Ms. Andrews, so first I will note that I am adding this shirt to my Plummer Panthers collection because I am a proud Plummer Panther. Plummer was my neighborhood school when I was a kid. It's my neighborhood school now. I am not at all surprised that your son is excelling there. I'm also not at all surprised about the condition of the building because when I went to Plummer, I'm pretty sure there was a desk that my mom's name might have been carved into, and I'm pretty sure she did it. And she, I'm just saying, we had the same first, third, and PE teacher. So I get it. Like, I hear you on the equity issues and all the things. And I'm with you, and I'm really disappointed that that is one of the schools, despite working on many modernizations, that we have not got to the place we needed to be around. And so I hear you. I'm with you. I would say, as far as the phones go, I think the conversation around digital equity is an important one, not just about like devices, because we're starting to deal with the devices. There are only 2 places where Ward 8 is solidly in front of Ward 7, because Ward 8 tends to be last in everything, and people ignore Ward 7 because it's not as sexy to be second poorest, quite frankly. But those 2 places are adult literacy. We are last in adult literacy, and we are last in the digital divide. That is actually a different question than what our instructors and educators are doing around supporting our kids when it comes to digital citizenship and all the things they put in, and a lot of the things we are dealing with when it comes to mental health, social media, managing all that comes with that, because we also hear from our students overwhelmingly that they feel more hopeless than they ever had. And like in the surveys, like we literally do a survey every year of our students, and some of that comes from what they are seeing in front of them on an unhealthy basis. So I would say that these are 4 different testimonies, but there's a lot for us to pick apart. I look forward to talking not just with Mr. Goldstein, but hearing from the other educators about the how, and I want to thank you all for your testimonies this evening.
Thank you. We will now call our next round of public witnesses. Is Kiana online? Sibion Soul? Monalicia Falls?
Hello?
Kathy Riley? Dallas Cherry? And Rachel Greaves. And so we will start with Kiana.
Good evening, members of the State Board of Education. I am Quiana Lamont, a paid parent leader who lives in Ward 7. All my children attend DC Public Schools. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak here today about a critical importance of safe passage. There is a 3-minute pickup regulation that RC school bus transportation has, which means that students who fail to depart their homes and board the bus within that time will not be able to use their transportation for that day. Please remember that RC exclusively provides transportation for children with disabilities and special needs. My 10-year-old son takes the RC school bus to and from school every day. His pickup time is 6:40 a.m. and he spends over an hour on the bus to get to school and over an hour every day coming home from school. Recently, my son was ready to be picked up, and he checked in with his bus attendant. Since the ride is over an hour, my son told the bus attendant that he needed to use the restroom before they left. The bus attendant said, okay. My son went to use the restroom in our home. A few minutes later, as he walked out the house, he watched as his bus attendant got back on the bus and drove off. My son ran after the bus, chasing it down in an attempt to get on the school bus. As he ran behind the school bus, a WMAT bus honked the horn at the RC school bus trying to get them to stop for my son. Eventually, my son caught up with his bus at a red light, where he asked to be let on the bus so he could go to school. The RC bus driver refused to open the door and left my son that day. My son returned home disappointed and upset that he lost out on a day of learning, despite his effort to communicate his needs with his bus attendant. This is one of the many ways that RC buses are not actually providing safe passage for our students. What is safe about my son not having access to a restroom for over an hour on the way to school? What is safe about my son sprinting down the street to try to catch the school bus? What is safe about my son returning home without any supervision on his walk? Before even informing the student and the parent that transportation has arrived, the bus staff began their 3-minute count as soon as they arrived on the student street. Therefore, 2 minutes had already passed by the time the bus attendant get off the bus and start to get noticed. I urge that the state board to advocate for increased oversight over the RC bus pickup procedure and reevaluation of the 3-minute pickup rule. Additionally, I urge the State Board of Education to advocate for an increased oversight and the evaluation of the drop-off process for Aussie school buses. Recently, I lived out every mother's worst nightmare. A call from the police asking if I knew where my son was. During this time, I was at work. I instantly thought something had
Ma'am.
happened to my son. The police, excuse me, the police revealed that
Ma'am,
he
I'm
was
sorry,
at
you've
home.
gone over your time.
Okay, thank you.
Sibian Saul.
Good evening, members of the State Board of Education and members of the community. My name is Saban Saul, and I'm a proud Ward 6 resident and parent of a middle schooler who attends Capitol Hill Montessori. I also serve with PAVE on the Ward 6 Parent Leaders and Education Board, and I'm a dedicated and committed K-12 bilingual educator. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I'm excited to share my voice about Bill B25-847, Advancing Equity in Special Education Protocols Amendment Act of 2024, and the need for increased options for specialized school programs available to students with special needs. I urge members to continue proactive efforts to engage with the students, caregiver community, and educators to make DCPS, the Division of Specialized Instruction vision, hold true on paper and in real life. All students deserve the opportunity to end their educational journey as thriving, independent members of society who can contribute to their communities and fulfill their highest potential. Students should be able to learn and grow and have their educational needs met in their chosen District of Columbia school and/or feeder pattern school community, regardless if the best educational placement is in DCPS or public charter school. The bill can support students with an individualized education program to exercise their right to remain in their initial placement feeder pattern school unless the programs available in the feeder pattern cannot support students' needs. Yes, the bill is a good and important step in the educational landscape, but it only addresses part of the need. Scholars of the District of Columbia student community deserve a whole child approach to address all educational needs, not just some. Scholars need options for programs in their feeder patterns in order to be able to attend, learn, and grow in the community we proudly call home, Washington, D.C. What next steps are you taking to guarantee specialized programs and placements are provided here? Are you committed to removing barriers that hinder academic success for the student community, especially access to specialized programs? In my time as an educator and a parent, I have seen the impact of lack of access to specialized school programs for students with disabilities. I have seen families of students with disabilities have to move their students out of a feeder pattern and/or commute large distances to get access to specialized school programs that meet the needs of their student. As we build out a plan to keep students in their feeder pattern, it is essential that specialized school programming is easily accessible for students with disabilities in these feeder patterns. If we want to fulfill DCPS Division of Specialized Instruction's vision to ensure students with disabilities thrive, it is crucial that we increase access to special school programs to fulfill this vision. I believe in our potential to create positive change that the bill proposes. However, I urge the council to support addressing the educational needs to the whole child with increased specialized school programs for students with disabilities and increased professional development for educators of students with disabilities.
Thank you. Ralisha Falls.
Good evening. I am Ralisha Gordon Falls. I am a Ward 8 resident. Today I am here to testify about the importance of supporting our students. As a parent, as a teacher, and as a student, I can personally speak to the growing stressors that are affecting students, families, and educators alike. As a parent and a member of the KIP DC PTO and KIP DC Parent Advisory Board, I see firsthand the toll that stress is taking on our children, and it's concern that weighs heavily on my heart. For students, the pressure to succeed academically is immense. Excessive homework and the demands of extracurricular activities leave little room for downtime, which is essential for their mental and emotional well-being. In addition to these academic and time management pressures, Many students are dealing with feelings of loneliness and imposter syndrome, where they constantly feel like they don't belong or aren't good enough. The constant social pressures of fitting in or achieving popularity only add to the stress that they already feel. When there are issues with teachers, whether from misunderstandings or mismatched expectations, it compounds the stress, leaving them with the little motivation to excel. These student stressors don't just go away. They manifest in physical and mental health problems, which leads to even more difficulties with schoolwork and relationships at home. I see how this not only affects my child's ability to thrive academically, but also impacts family time, which should be a supportive, loving environment. What happens at school, no matter how small, echoes throughout the rest of their day, affecting their ability to participate in other activities and experience joy in life. From a teacher's perspective, the stress can be just as overwhelming. Teachers are doing their best to juggle the demands of lesson planning, grading, teaching, while also trying to maintain their own well-being and work-life balance. Many of us have additional responsibilities at home, and the pressure to support students emotionally and academically can be draining. Teachers often find themselves managing the distress of parents and students, working hard to internalize that stress, but not is always easy. The emotional labor involved in supporting the mental health and well-being of students is a daily challenge, and sometimes it feels like they're swimming upstream. As a parent, my own stress comes from anxiety surrounding changes in the school system and how it impacts my child's education.
The time has expired.
Thank you.
Kathy Riley.
Thank you. I don't envy your job. I would like to start by extending my appreciation and gratitude for the work of Fraser O'Leary, the Ward 4 school board member, for the last 6 years. Fraser has been accessible, attended tons of meetings to listen, and connected with the schools on a regular basis delivering books. I want to thank Carlene for her courageous and informed positions on many issues. I feel we have all been informed and enriched by her contributions to your work as a state board of education. You will be missed as we welcome T. Michelle Colson and LaJoy Johnson-Law. Perhaps the biggest task coming up for all of you is the work on the graduation revisions. I look forward to seeing a robust engagement plan. How is this going to proceed? Is the advisory committee for the grad profile the same? Who is on it? Will teachers, parents, and others be represented? How were they selected? Are the meetings open? I served on the advisory committee for the last revision of the grad standards. We wrestled a lot with which subjects might benefit from a competency-based approach, which decouples the Carnegie unit and time from course completion, and for which subjects it would represent a narrowing of exposure. We struggled with how to ensure that students would not unknowingly be closing out opportunities by their course choices to post-secondary schools they might aspire to by their junior or senior year. We tried to assess the quality of internships and alternative experiences and how to measure that quality. As we tried one option on, we often discovered some unintended ramifications that needed to be addressed. I hope some of the work and recommendations from that group can be revisited. The grad record work has been very well received, so I was surprised to see a draft of possible grad requirements presented at your November working group session so soon. I feel it was premature and left out a larger community wrestling with what is necessary in a basic academic foundation. Why were math, science, and social studies expanded to 4 years in earlier years? It also seemed to then define the discussion going forward as how to be for, against, or amend this proposal. The grad requirements drive school budgets and staffing. What will transferring the coursework of electives to dual enrollment or internships out of the school mean at the schools? Implementation is crucial. We absolutely have to examine and seek to solve for the lack of engagement and limited success after high school. It should not come at the expense, though, of a strong academic foundation for all students. How can we prevent tracking by school? Can all students have the option for 4 years of math or science? That is not what has happened with world language. For this process to have integrity, there has to be trust that the decisions are not already made. So I look forward to working with all of you on this as we confront all the issues we're going to confront in 2025. So thank you.
Dallas Cherry.
Good evening, members of the board. I am Dallas Cherry, and I serve as a high school science instructor at Maya Angelou Public Charter School in Ward 7. I would like to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today on the issue of cell phone use in our schools. As we navigate the challenges of our modern classroom, it is essential to balance the diverse needs of students, staff, and the educational environment. As such, I will be presenting surveyed information shared by students and staff at my school. Cell phones are an undeniable part of students' lives. From my students' perspective, cell phones provide instant access to information, foster genuine connections with their peers and family, and serve as tools for both their creativity and self-expression. In emergencies, their cell phones might be a critical tool for ensuring personal safety and communication, as unfortunately many of my students are only responsible for themselves and their younger siblings. I've seen students left in tears due to loved ones being incarcerated and missing an expected phone call that they might not be able to make because their cell phones are taken away from them. Other students have mentioned that without their phones, they're left to find alternative means to entertain themselves. Despite this, the presence of cell phones in schools also raises significant concerns from staff members, including myself. We have witnessed how cell phones have become a distraction from learning. Notifications, social media, and FaceTime often pull students' focus away from their lessons, reducing engagement and academic performance. The misuse of phones can sometimes lead to issues such as bullying, cheating, and disruptions in the classroom. These challenges are not just educational, but also social, as they impact the school's community's overall well-being. And I've also observed some students call their family members to the school where incidents have unfortunately gotten violent. As we acknowledge these differing perspectives, we need to find solutions that address the root of the cell phone crisis while recognizing the valid needs of all. First, we should consider investing in dedicated spaces for digital media usage at all schools, such as computer labs or digital media studios. These spaces would allow for students to use technology in a structured and supervised environment. Secondly, we can implement practical storage solutions that would allow students to keep their phones on their person, but in a non-disruptive way. For example, pouches that lock during class time, but unlock during the period have shown success at some schools, while allowing students to retain possession of their phones, and they're ensuring that they're not actively using those phones. Additionally, schools should adopt clear, consistent policies on cell phone usage, and this can be done through the investment in professional development, where teachers and staff can learn to integrate technology and effective means in their classrooms. In conclusion, this is not a simple issue, but with thoughtful, collaborative solutions, we can create an environment where technology enhances learning rather than detracting from it. I urge the board to consider a balanced approach that respects both the potential and the challenges of cell phone usage in schools. Students are willing to submit their phones if turning their phones in doesn't feel punitive to them.
Sir, if you could wrap up. Rachel Hargraves, excuse me.
Yeah.
She's virtual.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. My name is Rachel Hargraves. I've been an 8th grade teacher at Deal Middle School for the past 8 years and an Empower Ed Fellow more recently. In a post-pandemic world, there's no question in my mind that the district-wide policy for cell phone use in schools should be a citywide ban with policies that work for individual schools. Before the pandemic, I would confiscate about 2 phones throughout the year. After students were home for a 1.5 years with only their phones for contact with the outside world, their and ours as adults, addictions compounded exponentially. I began confiscating 1 to 2 phones per class per day. Along with mask reinforcement, it was a tiresome and tedious activity that strained the relationships we were desperately trying to repair. Phones meant that kids had a much larger incentive to skip classes, coordinate meetups with friends. It meant that the existing distractions of an 8th grade emotional and interpersonal relationships were exacerbated by social media being present in the hallways and classrooms. It meant fights could be coordinated, classes could be skipped, relationships could be broken, and academics could be ignored. Empower Ed pushed into our school through a wellness grant in 2023. The overwhelming feedback from all of our teachers was that the biggest problem in our schools, the fight we could all not individually fight per class, per teacher, was the phones. The following school year, the phones were in yonder pouches. Students who lost or broke their yonder pouches turned in their phones at the beginning of the day to an administrator. The change in our community has been drastic. I don't have to compete with the entire internet for the attention of 30 14-year-olds sitting in front of me. However, yonder pouches do not work for every school community. For one thing, they're a massive expense costing tens of thousands of dollars per building, and thus they're not an equitable district-wide practice. Rather, the system at my husband's school of Stuart Hobson is the case study to emulate. Their phone policy, begun in 2022, is similar to a coat check, where they swap their phones for a number tag and return that tag in exchange for a phone at the end of the day. Their solution costs only a few $100s and works for all students. As a school that got hit harder by the pandemic and had more to recover from it in terms of social emotional health, academic success, and teacher retention, the phones were the turnaround catalysts. Stuart Hobson is one of the most improved schools and saw a massive shift in student wellness and teacher retention the following year. School safety and mental health declines with the presence of phones. The achievement gap widens as it did during the pandemic. Online toxic culture seeps into our buildings and conflicts can be coordinated. It's challenging enough to grab the attention of a room full of 8th graders and make their learning exciting, but the phones made it truly impossible. I'm proud to teach at a school that made this policy shift with the help of EmpowerEd, and I strongly recommend the rest of the district to follow Stuart Hobson's phone policy to see the improvements that their building saw. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. At this time, we will have a round of member questions. We will start with Representative Barnes.
Hello. Thank all of you for your testimonies today. I want to start with Mr. Cherry. I heard what you mentioned about cell phones, your take on it. You definitely brought out the positive side. So that's A+ for you. And what I do want to highlight is a couple things here. When it comes down to cell phones, what I did realize is a lot of teenagers, and I said this before, they're sneaky. So what's going to end up happening is that what they do at my school, I'm snitching on them, and I hope they're not watching, but what they do at my school, they use the computers. Rather than sitting here and, just taking the L, they get on a computer, they get on, the different, devices that the school give them, and what's next? They're going to take the school computer, they're going to take the, the iPad the school give them. All you're going to do is just continue to strip the kids away from what they have now until they have absolutely nothing but blank walls and pieces of paper. So, we're living in a digital age, and personally, I believe we need to just adapt to it and get with it. Because eventually, we're using the digital for everything else, but when it comes down to our students, it's like we're slowly but surely stripping them away from when this is a comfort, place that they're in. I'm at 150. So that's what I wanted to say to you. And then to Miss Rachel and to Miss Riley, and to all of y'all. So I heard some stuff, I heard some stuff about mental health in there somewhere regarding, the mentality of our youth, the mentality of our teachers as well. And I believe this kind of goes back into the SR 2427, what Representative O'Leary is about to get into eventually. We need to begin to support our teachers and our students. We don't have that many resources available. We have, different things such as wellness and everything like that, but we need more to assist our teachers. And this is a question for all of you, what can we do? How can we equip teachers to assist students? Because what I see a lot in my school is, 55, I see kids going to our teachers, but our teachers don't have the resources, the tools, the things necessary to assist them with what they're dealing with mentally.
I work at a government entity, so what I've been doing is taking what works for us, me as an employee, and I've taken it, maybe some strategies, and mimic them with the PTO. So my voice in the PTO has been, let's partnership, let's build a model, let's let the teachers know that we're here to help, So that's how we've been doing it. I believe in resources, so that's what we've been kind of funneling all of the different, to go into all the different events. We've been giving.
If you could wrap up, please.
Yes, we've been funneling all the different, going to all the different events, getting as much resource packets as we could, and now we have a new principal. And so what we've been doing is just letting him know that if we have audio learners, we have visual learners, and we have hands-on learners. No matter how much we send them text messages, whatever, sometimes they don't get it. So if we can just mimic it where we're putting them on emails, we're sending them out, and actually helping them, whether it's a teacher, a parent, or ourselves.
Thank you.
That's it.
Representative.
Thank you all so much for your testimony tonight. Mr. Cherry and Ms. Hargreaves, one particular issue that I have been considering with the phone predicament that we're all in is to what extent phones are symptoms of bigger problems or vessels for these problems to present themselves as compared to phones being the problems themselves. And I'm curious what you as teachers think about that question.
Yeah, so that's actually something I was sitting back there listening and thinking about when the last panel was up here. I feel like we just have a big problem in general, and right now we're just blaming cell phones, personally speaking. I think TikTok and all of those other social media things are a huge monster that we have to like face and think about. And of course, you get to TikTok through a cell phone, so it's easy to say, yeah, ban cell phones and cell phones are bad. But the reality is, I graduated in high school in 2009 and I had a cell phone. Like, I completely used a cell phone, and there was so many other things. Like, Facebook was also a thing that was coming up at the time. So there is a bigger monster in social media that needs to be attacked, in my opinion, besides just saying ban cell phones. And I'm going to pass it off.
Thank you.
Sorry. I was going to say, I agree with that. I think like what Scott said earlier about what type of technology we're talking about, because I also graduated in an era where I had a cell phone, but it was a dumb phone. And that's just an entirely different beast than one that can hop onto social media and one that can, again, access the entire internet. So blaming the cell phones didn't know are not the problem, but they are access to the problem. And our students have access all the time, and having an oasis of a school where they do not have that is so important. But I recognize the other member saying that they have devices, and that's true, but their devices play like little Minecraft games, and those are just not the same as the access of social media and texting and having constant contact with everyone in their lives in a place where they need to be as focused as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you both. I'm also curious what you think about the role that schools should have in internet literacy or social media literacy, if you think that is something that we should think about developing standards for, or just bringing into the classroom more in general.
Right now, our school has like a digital literacy component, but it's really limited, and it's just an advisory class. I think that part of the graduation requirements was adding a digital literacy component as a course, so that it's not just like a one-off 20-minute lesson that the kids get at the beginning of the year.
Great, thank you.
Representative Ting.
Yeah, so just to quickly share some thoughts on for that. So I understand that a lot of fights are recorded and that can incentivize fights, but it's my understanding that most fights occur like after school or like not during school hours, right? So if the phones were banned in schools, those fights would happen anyways. It's not like they're happening at lunch, or are they happening at lunch?
Yeah, so I can fully say that when our students actually had cell phones like regularly last year, like this is the first year my school's officially banned cell phones, despite students sneaking phones in, as was mentioned earlier. Students would literally call their friends during class, and they would run into another classroom to go fight. So they're not waiting for lunch, or they're not waiting to get to the metro to do these things. If they want to do it in real time, just how they have access to things immediately on their phones, they can go do things if they want to answer your question.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
I agree.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. My next thing is actually for Miss Lamont, for your son's buses. I would love to follow up with you on I remember you were here last time talking about how your son wasn't allowed to eat breakfast, so he goes to school hungry, and now I'm hearing that he's not allowed to pee, and that like it's just miserable for him in general. So I would love to follow up with you to like on a resolution or something. Secondly, for what the heck? To follow up on Representative Barnes' point on people going on their like computers to like do other things. Like I agree that it is my opinion that by removing the cell phone component, you don't have your social media, and it is somewhat easier to regulate what someone does on their computer because like for example like before I came to this meeting, I was leading my school's programming club, and I will admit that some of our 5th graders were on video games, and I was just standing there like, am I really going to yell at them to not do that? But the aspect is that I had the control and I could yell at them to stop, versus a phone is like you can tuck it under there, you can go to the bathroom and use it, and sometimes people cheat on it, and etc. And it's harder for a teacher to control that than it is for them to control a phone. However, I still have mixed feelings on a ban. What else? I would also heavily emphasize that I believe that any sort of cell phone ban or resolution should differentiate between dumb phones and smartphones, and that I believe that dumb phones and dumb watches seem like a useful idea if like you have like a 10-year-old and you want your 10-year-old to be able to call you if they're like getting mugged on the street, or after the fact probably, not during, probably listen to the mugger. I yield my time.
And you have 9 seconds. Are you done?
I'll take my time. I'm slowly losing my sanity.
Sorry. It's up to you, sir.
All right. So
Representative Henderson.
Ms. Riley, thank you for speaking to the graduation requirements. In addition to process, were there any initial reactions that you had for what was proposed that you would want us especially to be attuned to as it moves forward?
My initial reaction was that I would like the first question to be, what do we need? What is the academic foundation? Where do we need to start from? Because, you know, I filled out the survey, I looked at that, and it felt like a lot of things had already, I remember when we went to 4 years of social studies because the students only had 1 year of world history and they left unprepared in that, so that was correcting that. So, and I remember when we were like looking at algebra and all of that. So I guess what I would like to start with is, what is the base? And do we feel comfortable with the base instead of what we're going to throw out? And then maybe we will come with 3 years of this or that, but I didn't feel that question really got asked. Does that address your question? That was my main reaction, that it was too soon, and I wanted that to be the first question.
Yes, thank you. I don't have any other questions, thanks.
I could keep talking. That's okay.
Representative O'Leary.
Mr. Cherry, if you were a student, why would you need your phone in a classroom?
Thank you for that question. I don't really have that answer.
That's good.
No, I mean, I have an answer. I don't think I have the answer. I will say for me, speaking as a student, I'm a lifetime learner and teacher, one of the things that I try to do as a teacher and also a sometime student is I utilize technology in my classroom for my students when they did have cell phones. One of the things I really love doing is like scavenger hunts, and with their scavenger hunts, they had to use their cell phones to do this scavenger hunt. Unfortunately, this app that they use called Goose Chase does not work on a laptop or an iPad or any of those things. So that was a very useful learning tool that I could no longer use this year. I manipulated their algorithm. So yes, I know TikTok was a bad thing, but there were times when I utilized their TikTok to push my science STEM things onto their timelines by assigning them videos to watch on TikTok that were science related. So yeah, they can get what they want, but at the same time, I'm very much so getting what I want, and they would absolutely, you know, their algorithm would change, to answer that question from a teacher standpoint as a student as well.
No, thank you. I'm just thinking that if in my classroom, there shouldn't be time for a student to be on a phone. And I mean, I'm an old person. I have 5 children. They all know much more about working my phone than I do. But the reason I asked you the question is that I don't think there's a reason why a student should have a phone in the classroom unless there's a extenuating circumstance where you can utilize it in the classroom. We haven't decided on any kind of a policy. We're just trying to get the schools to have some unanimity in a policy. It's not banning phones from the schools necessarily. It's just that they shouldn't be in the classroom on. I agree. If we could guarantee that all the students had them in their pockets and they weren't on like mine right now, then that'd be fine. But the thing about it is I can't think of a reason, and I can argue, I don't know how much time I have. I got 20 seconds.
20
to
seconds, 16.
Argue the fact about safety in the schools. All right, I can't remember a child ever being shot in a school when they were on lockdown. I just want to leave it at that.
Thank you.
Representative Reed.
Good evening. Thank you, Kathy, for the kind words. Much appreciated. Mr. Cherry, right?
Yes.
Cool. You said the wild goose chase doesn't sound so monstrous, but you mentioned there being a bit of a monster somewhere in the social media. Can you talk about that? Because I guess that would be kind of unpacking some of the root cause.
Yeah, so I do believe right now a lot of what we see as like security risks and things that we talk about that the government is really talking about with TikTok and social media and Instagram has very much so been an issue for students at our schools. I also do see that it's kind of annoying to see little kids dancing all day and doing stupid dances all day. So that's a monster in itself to me. I do also feel like I've seen a lot of students randomly FaceTiming during class or randomly FaceTiming through Instagram. So I think too much access is very much so a problem. And yeah, I can speak on it and address it in the school, but in my classroom. But if schools aren't really putting policies in place to really enforce these things beyond my classroom and really saying like, hey, this is the thing, let's mandate and get rid of this, I'm just going to keep talking to a wall till I'm tired. So that's the monster for me.
Cool. Thank you. And thank you all for coming to testify, as well as thank you online.
I could speak a little more.
Representative Williams.
Yes. Thank you all for your testimony tonight. Charlie, I want to start with you. I know with the response to Representative Henderson, you had kind of shared where you would start and like the focus on the process there. What do you think you would recommend to us in terms of the best way to go about like engagement on the high school graduation requirements?
It's hard. I think it's hard to get a whole plan that is, right now I don't see that we've engaged the parents and the graduates that we could learn from what they got, and the current. Right now the focus is on the current students and on you all, and so I think it's a hard job, but I think the grad record was a good way to start. The thing about having an advisory committee with open meetings is it does force you to have an agenda of you're walking through a process. Like what are the series of questions? I suggested that I liked the academic foundation as an important question, but the other things we wrestled with, you brought it up here, is the Carnegie unit. Where does that fit in? It's a fairly complex thing that you're undertaking. So I think your first decision is, are you undertaking the whole thing? Or are you just solving one problem? Are you just looking at, do we need more CTE? So I think for all of you to to ask OSSI, this is the piece we want, or we want these 3 pieces. What I hear from people is that they want to solve the problem. The students are not engaged, they're not getting out enough. Attendance, all these things will be what we've learned from the CTE engagement. Maybe we should enlarge and expand that. My fear is that as we do that, we might lose things that we're assuming will still be there. So I would start with the work we didn't finish, and then I would establish a foundation and find out what you're solving for and then why it's a problem. And then after you identify the why, it will help you move on to what the kinds of solutions you want to look at, and not to short circuit it. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Yes. Representative Best.
So when I was a math teacher, I remember using like Madden to teach multiplication and algebra to some of the students, some of my young men who were struggling in that field, and they loved it, right? Because it was something they were already doing and they were engaged in. And so when I hear you, Mr. Cherry, talk about using TikTok to meet the kids where they are, like, that makes sense. Like, why wouldn't we do that, right? Like, we're turning our phones into the big bad, right? But we're not looking at the root cause. And I remember, like, as a teacher, right, like, I was taught not to take away, but to incentivize. Like, we've been explicitly taught that. But right now, we're here talking about taking away. And so, once again, I'm just thinking about all these things. So why is it different with our phones? My question then goes to, what are the discipline policies that are related to the inappropriate use of cell phones, such as bullying, in the schools, and how is it carried out, and is it carried out with fidelity? I think those are the questions that we need to ask before we start talking about banning cell phones. So, like, I don't know if any of the teachers are here or anybody who's in school wants to share anything about that, but that is a question that I have.
One of the things that I feel like we do absolutely need to address is really the discipline policies. I believe when these things do happen, it honestly feels like, again, just quick slap on the wrist, go back to the classroom, here's your cell phone again. And I think that's really, really, really like challenging. One of the things that my school tries to do is implement these, I won't call it detention, but they'll call it habits of success into our classes, which are more so mediation classes between students who have gotten into altercations or just, I really don't want to call it detention, but just little things to like have students like write out like new goals and goal setting procedures that they want to like actually implement that will actually help them be better. I think a lot more students are trying to avoid being in habits of success, and that's kind of why they'll stop negative behaviors, but I don't really feel like it's helpful for them. Again, I do think a lot of this is punitive, and we're strictly just removing things instead of giving them. One of the things that I included in my testimony is that I believe we should still get back to other things like recess. Like, I teach high school, and kids are like, I have nothing to do, and you're also taking a phone away from me. Of course, I'm going to probably try to like act out or fight or something like that because I'm bored. Like, they've said those words to me, and who knew that one day we would all grow up and it would be our last day having recess? Like, I think we should be able to invest in some of those things again to give our students things to do. Thank you.
Thank you, and sorry that I didn't get an opportunity to respond to each of you as well.
Representative Chang.
Ms. Riley, my questions build off of what Representative Williams started. I'm also curious to hear more about what worked well, what didn't work well in the last set of revisions when you were an advisory member.
It's hard. I think what worked well is having specific things that we were wrestling, like we looked at all the college graduate, what was required. So what were we blocking students out of by reducing, reducing requirements in certain areas. So it would be like a process, the process, and it's who you engage and exactly what you're engaging them with. And so that's why we were looking specifically at competency-based. And I regret in a way that if we had gone more toward the foreign language being something that you could test, you could say, we have good tests for that, so you could say you were fluent and get a credit for that, and that enabled you to move on. It didn't mean you would move out. So I guess what I'd say is I would like you to look at that again, and also we didn't want it in social studies, in English, and other things where you can't be competent in social studies. There's too much. So there's too much to learn. That was where we kind of landed. But anyway, I'm going on too long, but I urge you to get to the questions, and then we can figure out who you need to engage on those questions.
Mm-hmm. And the way that it was, the way that the engagement was actually done, right? Would you also advise having another advisory committee, or would you go about it a different way?
Well, I do think, having just come off the Boundary Advisory Committee, there is something to people in a room with different perspectives and coming from different points of view in an open way, having to discuss it, and then having to go get feedback, and they're not there representing just themselves. I have found that process helpful and useful, even though, and then having to struggle with compromise. It's the process you all have, but an advisory committee with different people with different hats, I have found that useful.
Are there other options you would consider or recommend?
Other than that, then I would look at the different bodies of people that you need to engage, including graduates, including, the graduation requirements affect everybody. They can affect the teaching staff, they affect charters and DCPS. So I could help you make a list, and if you don't cross-sector them, then they don't get to learn from each other, and we stay stuck in what we think. So I highly recommend that these groups are not just the graduates, just this, because we don't have a chance to learn from each other.
Thank you.
Representative Goulet.
I want to thank everyone for testimony tonight that we've heard. Ms. Lamont, if you can follow up with our staff on the issue of the specific incident that occurred, I'd like them to follow up with OSSI. I'm glad to, if you want to send me the email, I'm glad to follow up directly on it, because I think that specific incident should be addressed. I don't think it's acceptable what happened, and I'm sorry that that did happen to your child, so we can follow up on that. Ms. Riley, I just want to keep working with you on this process. I think we've done a great job with other resolutions we've passed here. I want to make sure we do the same thing here and that we give ample time to consider this. And I'm not in a rush for it, so I think we got to get it correct. And I look forward to working with you and my colleagues on making sure we have the right process in place to review this in a thorough way. Back to the issue of cell phones, I think Mr. Goldstein talked about this the right way earlier of giving schools an array of options to look at, but ones within a spectrum that focus on banning cell phones during instructional periods. I think your answer to Representative O'Leary's question was very telling, Mr. Chair. There's not really a reason why a student needs a cell phone in a learning environment to compete with what you're trying to teach them. And for me, it's not taking something away. We've heard about taking something away. I think we're giving something back to our students. We're giving them back the ability to learn without a distraction there. We're giving the ability to concentrate. We're teaching good habits that if you're in a meeting or you go to college, that you're not on your phone and you're listening to your professor or your boss or supervisor, and you actually have the ability to focus. So we're teaching good habits, and we're allowing the students to be free from the bullying and social media pressures that these things bring. I mean, Australia has banned social media, I think up to age 16 now, because they're looking at the harmful implications on youth mental health from being constantly bombarded by these sites. So I don't think of it as taking anything away. I think of it as giving back to our youth a chance to learn, distraction-free, and I fully think we should move as a board in January to do what DCPS has already done successfully, which is to eliminate these at the middle school level during instructional hours. And as we heard from our superintendent, we've had very few complaints about that, and I think it is the right direction to move in. And I really appreciate your testimony and feedback today, and I'm out of time. Oh, my goodness. Oh, 30 seconds. All right. Mr. Cherry, okay, I got to use the new clock. Anything to react to that in that time?
So I do want to say I also really agree, especially with the idea of, like, we're teaching our students how to learn self-regulate, especially when they go towards college. You're not just going to pull out a phone and talk in the middle of class. And so I do really agree. But I also want to highlight that a lot of my students are also very happy with the fact that there are cell phone bans. Like, there are a lot of them that are saying, thank you for this. Like, I can focus a lot more now, and I'm not missing my phone. So.
Vice President Patterson.
Thank you. I appreciate all the conversation. I truly appreciate what my colleague, Representative Goulet, just said. I just really think how you just stated that, what we're actually teaching our children, because I actually have a son that's in this room right now, and he's on his cell phone as he looks up. So, you know, to put him on blast, so to speak. And I know how much time he spends on his cell phone. I want to also say to Ms. Limon, if I pronounced it correctly, that is an issue, especially with the buses. We've kind of addressed before. We asked that they extend the time from 3 minutes to 5 minutes. We have major testimony on it because we know the effect that it's very hard to make sure that you're outside and ready to go. You basically have to be standing outside when the bus pulls up to meet it and make sure you're out in 3 minutes. 5 minutes, asking for 2 more minutes is not a whole bunch consideration in those particular situations. So we support you on that. I look forward to working with my colleagues to continue to advocate for a few more minutes to make sure our students can get to their buses. The last thing I want to say, I want to talk to Ms. Gordon Falls, the KIPP parent, correctly?
Yes.
Correct? Okay. I want to give you a few minutes to finish your statement real quick about anything that you wanted to add when you were testifying, because you kind of got cut off. I want to give you that, and then I want to ask you a few questions about, specifically because I know KIPP, about, you know, what you're going through.
Yes, I wanted to say that through our partnerships, we've partnership with Anacostia Library, we've partnered with Turner Library, and now that we have our literacy nights or our STEM nights, we've actually have them there, and they're able to give out books and add more resources for the parents. So I now understand that because parents learn differently, that if they master something, then it's much easier with the children to learn, and then it helps the teacher. And a lot of the parents, they just don't know how. Some people speak, some people text, some people actually open up their emails. Not everyone is the same learner. So if we can just figure out a way to get the information out there, whether it's all 3 different ways, then why not do that? Go the extra step and utilize the libraries. They actually have events. They already have mental health symposiums sometimes, and a lot of times the parents just don't know. How can we give them that information?
And if I can, with these 12 seconds, you said you've talked to the PTO. You're part of the PTO, is that correct? And part of the PAB as well? So for your school and then the overall PAB, correct?
Yes.
I look forward to working with you, because I only have 1 second. So look forward to following up with you. Exactly.
President Thompson.
I guess I'll start where the panel started with Ms. Lamons. So I want to acknowledge, yes, that 3 minutes is not enough time, but I also just want to acknowledge just the way your son was treated. because you telling that story and him running after the bus and then like that was just way too much, and it raises some questions for me about what we're communicating to drivers as the expectation. Like, what are the and I've gotten questions like this around, like, what are the procedures, or what are the incentives? Like, is it that you're on time with no matter what, like that? Like, so I do have some kind of follow-up questions. I've asked the staff to share your email with me, so I'll follow up with you via email since you're a Ward 7 resident. But I have some subsequent testimonies and some issues that go beyond just the 3 minutes listening to you. Ms. Saul, I don't see your testimony in our file. I would like to have it, and so if you could submit it, that would be helpful. Because you referenced a specific piece of legislation that has some very specific recommendations. So if you could get that to us, that would be wonderful. Ms. Riley, I hear you on just like where we should be starting from. I tend not to assume that the decision has already been made, even if that's how at times it is presented to us. We don't, you know, the materials come as they are. We will have all the requisite conversations. But I absolutely appreciate you not only reminding us to go back to the work of the advisory committee that was done before, but also offering that as a possible vehicle to help this work, lifting up the cross-sector opportunity, and just why these requirements are so important, because they do affect everyone. And Mr. Cherry, I appreciate you highlighting the uniqueness of Maya Angelou. When you were testifying, you mentioned that you all have students who, you know, one of their anxieties is around missing a call from a family member. Now, I just want to highlight that Maya Angelou is not just any high school. Not only do they have adult learners, but the mission is really targeted at folks who have like these are the most at-risk high school students, so I appreciate that. And I do believe that there are some specific considerations for the Maya Angelou population, and we should talk about that. But I think this is something that, again, we should have more discussion, and we should be lifting up best practices, promising practices, making some recommendations with the knowledge that not all of our schools are the same. So thank you for that. I believe I am last, and you all have concluded our public testimony for the evening. And so I do want to thank you all for your testimony. I want to remind anyone and everyone who has testified before us to make sure they do submit the written testimony. It is very helpful to us so that we can follow up. But also, we have started doing recaps of the public meetings. And those are, I guess, for the social studies teachers out there, those are the first sources that we can use to help us with the recaps. And so we would like to recap what you shared with us as accurately as possible. So that is my friendly reminder to folks to submit testimony if they have not already. You all are welcome to leave the table. Thank you for your time this evening. And then I'm going to move us as a board to our administrative votes for the evening. So based on our amended agenda, we are striking SR 24-28, and we are actually going to move on to vote on one state resolution. I will look for a motion and a second, followed by Director Butler reading the resolution into the record. Once the resolution is read into the record, we will have member discussion and 3-minute rounds of statements before roll call votes. That's actually not true. We're not going to do 3-minute rounds of statements. I'm just going to be honest. They put that in the script every single time, and I skip it. So we will have member discussion. If there is discussion, we're not going to do 3-minute rounds of member discussion. And we will, so I am now looking for a motion for State Resolution SR 24-27, calling for a comprehensive induction and mentoring program for new teachers in the District of Columbia. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Representative O'Leary. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Representative Henderson. The motion has been properly moved and seconded by Representative O'Leary and Representative Henderson and Director Butler.
Madam
coming to
President.
you to read the resolution into the record unless someone interrupts
Yes.
me.
Madam President, may I move a motion to waive the reading of the resolution without objection?
You may. And
So
so,
moved.
members, we have a motion before us to waive the reading. Is there a second to waive the reading?
Second.
I think I heard Representative Barnes got there first, so I'm going to let him have that. All in favor of waiving the reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, so we will not be reading the motion into the record. I'm going to come to folks for discussion, starting with our Student Advisory Committee statement. So is there a statement from the SAC?
There is.
Perfect.
All right. On SR 24-27, calling for a comprehensive induction and mentoring program for new teachers in the District of Columbia, the Student Advisory Committee, SAC, voted unanimously in support of the resolution, 38 in favor and 0 against. The SAC wholeheartedly endorses the use of a mentoring program to support teacher retention and learning. The SAC has key ideas for the implementation of this mentoring program, as well as some broader curiosities. The SAC believes that mentoring other teachers may be exhausting, so mentors should receive adequate stipends and rewards to compensate for their efforts. The SAC supports members being primarily from the same building as the teachers being mentored. The SAC would also like clarification on the structure of mentorship, including the required academic qualifications to be a mentor. The SAC would also like clarification on how mentoring sessions will take place, including what mentors will be expected to teach and how the success of the mentoring program will be tracked. The SAC also supports using a one-year pilot to test out the mentoring program before rolling it out to all of DC. The SAC supports analyzing how other jurisdictions implement mentoring programs. The SAC also further supports work into minimizing harmful effects on teacher retention rate associated with CAPE and impact assessments and investigating the high stress or lack of leadership opportunities that might also lead to low teacher retention. Overall, the SAC is in favor of this resolution and hopes that it adequately compensates mentors, provides adequate and clear structure for mentoring sessions, includes a one-year pilot and data tracking of its success, and is not the only step that DC takes to making sure the teachers have the support they deserve.
Thank you, Representative Ting. Is there further discussion? Representative O'Leary.
When I came on the board, before I came on the board, I testified in front of the board about a mentoring program for teachers. That was 6 years ago. And I'm so glad that at my last meeting, we will pass this resolution, and hopefully our young teachers can get sufficient mentoring and professional development so that we won't have a teacher retention problem.
Thank you, Representative O'Leary. Is there further discussion? Representative Barnes.
I do believe that the passing of this will definitely bring forth more educators, such as Representative O'Leary, who's dedicated, hardworking, and truly inspiring to see doing what he do. So, thank you.
I want to thank the Student Advisory Committee for a very thoughtful and thorough response to this resolution. This is a case where we are asking OSSI to design something and implement it, and I hope that that statement would be included in what they consider as they do that, and I'm hopeful that it could really be something that is supportive of our students and of our teachers and therefore our students. So thank you to the committee and committee staff for their work on this.
Representative Ting.
Yeah, to echo Representative Henderson's point, I really hope that this on-the-record statement by the SAC and all our students' feedback gets made into it. Also, I would like to again emphasize that I think Representative O'Leary did a really good job in promoting this mentoring program. As personally speaking, as a current high school student, I've had teachers cry, teachers leave the classroom, quit their jobs mid-year. Several of them quit their jobs mid-year. I have so many we always have new teachers that come in and they don't know what to do, and what often happens is like me personally or other people, other of the smart students or whatever will like read ahead, study ahead, and teach the class and do a lot of the heavy lifting. And it's pretty bad because it's very overwhelming for these new teachers, and so they often do have to rely on someone, even if it is a student stepping up to help them, and they're very thankful for that. But it's also like terrible. I think honestly, out of all my teachers that I've had throughout all of middle and high school, I think the vast majority of them have quit teaching, ? And so it is really awful as like a student just seeing all this high like turnover, etc.
Representative Williams.
Yeah, I echo Representative Henderson's acknowledgement of the work of the SAC. So thank you all for the thorough response. Representative O'Leary, thank you for your leadership on this and making sure that it's something that we can pass and then continue to advocate on in the new year. I think it's critical for our teaching workforce. I mean, the stories there and just teachers being our #1 resource for student achievement in the building and the national and local crisis that we're ongoing. I think this is really something that holds a lot of promise and something that the value and importance of it can't be overstated.
Further discussion? All right, a very fitting motion from Representative O'Leary. I am seeing no further discussion. So the motion is to adopt SR 24-27, and I'm coming to Executive Director Butler to call the roll.
Representative Barnes,
Yes.
Representative Mayer,
Yes.
Representative Ting,
Yes.
Representative Best, Representative Chang,
Yes.
Representative Goulet,
Yes.
Representative Henderson,
Aye.
Representative O'Leary,
Yes.
Representative Reed,
Aye.
Representative Williams,
Aye.
Representative Patterson, Representative Thompson.
Of course.
SR 24-27, calling for a comprehensive induction and mentoring program for new teachers in the District of Columbia, has passed.
Thank you. The board is now moving on to adopt a consent agenda for ceremonial resolutions. Director Butler, please read the title of the resolutions to be included in tonight's consent agenda.
The resolutions to be voted on in tonight's consent agenda. CR 24-8, recognizing outgoing Ward 4 Representative Dr. Fraser O'Leary. CR 24-9, recognizing outgoing Ward 8 Representative Dr. Carleen Reed. CR 24-10, honoring DC Bilingual Public Charter School as a 2024 National Blue Ribbon School. CR 24-11, honoring Payne Elementary as a 2024 Blue Ribbon School. CR 24-12, honoring the legacy of outgoing Ward 7 Councilmember Vincent C. Gray. CR 24-13, recognizing Josephine Baez Robinson for her role as founding executive director of the DC Education Research Collaborative.
All right, thank you, Executive Director Butler. I actually would like to move that we remove CR 24-8, which is recognizing Representative O'Leary from the consent agenda, so we can discuss that separately, which would give us the opportunity essentially to say nice things about our colleague. So I'm going to recommend that we remove that one. Oh, I know. And so now I'm looking to see if someone will second that.
Second.
All right, I heard a second, I think, from Representative Henderson first, and it sounds like Representative Goulet also agrees. All right, so we are going to vote on removing that one item from the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. Motion carries. Before we discuss CR 24-8, unless there are other removals. All right, so before we discuss CR 24-8, we do need to vote on the consent agenda, to adopt, the amended consent agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the amended consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Is there a second? Thank you, Representative Henderson. A motion has been made by Representative Williams and seconded by Representative Henderson. Having properly been moved and seconded, I'm going to ask the board to now move to a vote on the amended consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. All right. We will now move to the one ceremony resolution that was removed from the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve 24-8, recognizing outgoing Ward 4 Representative
Madam Chair.
Fraser O'Leary? Yes.
Before we do, I'd like to, since we're not required to read CRs, I'd like to move a motion to have the executive director read the CR into the record, please.
Oh, okay. Wait, I think that comes after.
Oh.
Oh, you wanted to read it before?
Why don't we read it and then we vote?
Well, you haven't voted on it yet.
Yeah, so we'll get it, oh, that's true. So, I'm gonna ask Director Butler, thank you, to read the resolution, CR 24-8 into the record.
State Board of Education ceremonial resolution recognizing outgoing Ward 4 Representative Dr. Fraser O'Leary, CR 24-8. Whereas the State Board of Education recognizes Dr. Fraser O'Leary for his dedicated service on behalf of the residents of Ward 4, working to improve educational outcomes for students in Ward 4 and across the District of Columbia since joining the DC State Board in January of 2019. Whereas a distinguished career spanning over 47 years, Dr. O'Leary has made a lasting impact as a DC public schools educator, including 40 years at Cardozo Senior High School, where he taught English, coached numerous sports teams, and was named the Teacher of the Year at both Cardozo and Garnett Patterson Junior High School. Whereas Dr. O'Leary's coaching excellence and his impact on student athletics has been recognized through his naming as the Urban Coalition Coach of the Year in 1985 and his induction into the DC Coaches Hall of Fame in 2007. Whereas Dr. O'Leary has demonstrated a lifelong dedication to education and the humanities, having earned his Master's of Liberal Arts at St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico in August of 1973, and later being awarded an honorary doctorate of philosophy and humanities from St. Mary's College in Maryland in 2009. Whereas Dr. O'Leary's contribution extend far beyond his work in the classroom, as evidenced by his roles as past president of the Board of Directors for the Penn Faulkner Foundation, a member of the Toni Morrison Society Board of Directors, and the founder of Mrs. O'Leary's Books for Friends, and as a dedicated advocate for safe and healthy learning environments for all students. Dr. O'Leary's education advocacy on the state board has been defined by efforts to advance equity and learning opportunities in schools, including his leadership in pushing for the revision of the outdated social studies standards and his push to eliminate the Partnership for Assessment Readiness for College and Careers test as an evaluation tool. Whereas Dr. O'Leary's leadership on the state board includes his service as vice president in 2023, during which he coordinated and participated in recurring meetings with the agency leaders from across the education cluster, in addition to chairing the administrative committee. And whereas during his tenure on the state board, Dr. O'Leary has also served as chair of the Teacher Practice and School Supports Committee, and most recently, the Educator Excellence Committee, on which he championed critical issues directly impacting DC educators' ability to achieve excellence in their craft as educator preparation, induction, and mentoring. Now therefore be it resolved that the DC State Board of Education honors Ward 4 Representative Fraser O'Leary on the 11th day of December in the year of 2024 for his outstanding service, leadership, and unwavering dedication to the students and educators of the District of Columbia, and wishes him the best in his future endeavors.
Thank you, Director Butler. So now, we are going to discuss, right? Yes. Okay. When we make all the amendments, it gets hard to track all the things. So members, is there any discussion about Representative O'Leary? Representative Goulet.
I'll be brief here, Fraser, but I feel it's really interesting and special that you're being honored on the same agenda as Vince for this, because the first time I ever got to know about you was you testified at one of Vince's hearings, and he proceeded to just, while we're up on the dais, give this glowing history of your achievements, like Fraser's the greatest guy in the world, and then he told me about your entire coaching record, where you went for various schools, all of your successes, and he just thought the world of you and just spoke so highly of you. So, I took his word for it because I trust everything he says and think the world of him. So then I got to meet you. We went out to lunch. You tried to get me on the right path of promoting a vegetarian lifestyle, which I haven't stuck to, but it was just really nice. You made me feel welcome on the board. I love getting to meet you. I mean, you're an incredible person, an incredible colleague, and we're going to really miss you around here. So thanks for the honor of getting to serve with you here, and I really wish you all the best. And you can always call us up and make sure we're staying on the right path. You had one great final act of getting the cell phone thing moving here, and I think it's a really special thing that you got that done here in the last meeting of the board. So I just thanks so much for being here, serving with us, and that's all I got because we got to get out of here, I guess. So I'll leave it at that, Fraser. But thank you.
Further discussion? Representative Williams, Representative Mayer, in that order.
Yeah. Fraser, ultimately, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your service as a teacher. Thank you for your service as a coach. Thank you for the attendance at NASME, where people from around the country adore you and love to interact with you. And thank you for being so forceful in your advocacy for better schools. I'll miss you on the dais, and I hope you're not a stranger around here. So thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
I would like to echo what has already been said. My first experience with interacting and working with you was as a student testifying here, and I remember you being incredibly kind and receptive to what we were asking, and you were helpful and you were encouraging, and it was really amazing to feel that from someone in your position. And now working with you, I can tell that you're like that in this environment as well, and talking to us and in expressing your passion for making DCPS a better system and making sure that our schools and our students are as equipped to succeed as possible. So thank you for representing Ward 4, and thank you for everything that you have done.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Representative Henderson.
I'll just quickly say thank you for your service, and thank you for this last resolution that we just passed. I think is a good one to go out on. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Robert.
Is it my turn? I would like to say that Fraser is my friend. And so I am going to miss him deeply on the dais, but I will not miss him at all because he's still going to be my friend. Fraser was the first person to call and congratulate me when I was elected to the State Board of Education. I don't know if he knows that. I was exhausted because I had been at the polls for not all day, but for days. And I didn't really want to talk to anyone. And I remember walking into my house and I got this phone call, and I didn't even know Frazier. But it was the happiest phone call. And I was so glad to have him as a colleague at that moment. And I'm super excited that you are going to be like the first member we will celebrate at a celebration of service. Because if anyone can tell from this resolution, Frazier's lifetime has been of service. Bernice calls him the most interesting man in the world because he is. And I am always just so impressed and appreciative by all the lives that you've led. And I'm looking forward to your memoirs one day. I know that you are a huge fan of Toni Morrison, and she didn't start to write until later in life. So I'm holding on to the idea that there will be memoirs from the Honorable Mr. O'Leary. And I just appreciate all the love that you've shown through all the things, because as Toni Morrison said, you know, love is or it ain't, right? Like, then love ain't no love at all. And you love so much, and we love you. And so thank you, not just for your service, but just for being a phenomenal human.
Thank you very much.
So, the motion is on celebrating our outgoing colleague, Representative O'Leary, CR 24-8. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, they wouldn't count anyway. And so motion unanimously carries, which is of no surprise. Thank you, Representative O'Leary. Did you want to say anything? Do you want to say anything?
How much time do I have?
Don't make me.
It's only like 8 o'clock, right? So.
It is 9:16.
Oh, really?
It is.
Okay. No, I'll save my remarks for next week.
Okay.
But before, I would just want to thank everyone on the staff, all right? Because I didn't know anything about being on the State Board of Education when I got elected. Nothing. And the staff of this board are the most professional, thorough, hardworking employees in this city. And we couldn't do anything without y'all. So I'm going to miss you. But just keep on doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative O'Leary. We will look forward to celebrating you further. We will also look forward to your parting words in our blog, and everybody will get to have words. So I know I'm upset too. But we will not miss Ms. Frazier because he's still our friend. So, members, are there any announcements or comments you would like to make before we adjourn? You have, yes.
The staff would like for you all to gather up front with a photo of Representative O'Leary after the adjournment.
Okay. Yes.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, everybody.
That also. All right. On that note, I want to thank members for their time and engagement tonight. The State Board will convene our next working session in the new year, January 8th, 2025. We wish everyone a safe and hopefully restful holiday season. With no further business before the board, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, it was moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor of going home, please say aye. Aye. Or wherever you would like to go. And this public meeting of the DC State Board of Education is adjourned at 9:19 p.m. Thank you all.